Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. The meeting is hereby called to order. And as always, I'll note that this meeting is being video recorded. And we will begin by taking a moment of appreciation for our troops serving around the globe in defense of our country. Great. Thank you very much. We have a very full agenda for ourselves this evening. Christine is penalizing us for the week off we took last Tuesday. And just to note on that, with respect to the items on the hospital and the town meeting, I'm not intending to take public comment on those tonight. There's going to be public comment opportunities on both in the near future, and so in the interest of time and moving it along and good order of the meetings, we're not going to take public comment on those. And I probably won't take public comment on the Affordable Housing Trust item unless we're inclined to actually vote to issue the RFP, which I don't think we will tonight. It'll probably be a preliminary discussion, but we will take public comment on items 5 and thereafter. So just a housekeeping item to begin. And we start with Town Clerk Marion Benaldi, who is here to request us to approve appointments of election warden and election inspectors for the special town meeting and special town election. Welcome, Town Clerk Marion Benaldi. All the way from downstairs.
All the way from downstairs.
Oh, well, hold on. This is Gus's first meeting. He's got to put his speaker off. All right.
So I gave you a list of our election inspectors, and they're for the town meeting and the election. Tracy Clank would be the election warden for both, overseeing the inspectors and the vote and all that jazz with me. So I just wanted to make sure to get this appointment done and in the books before we move forward. I was uncertain as to how many more times you would be meeting prior to those events.
Okay. Pete, any questions, comments?
No.
Gus, questions?
No questions.
What is there a difference between an election warden and an election inspector?
No, inspector's just fancier. Inspector's the James Mullen word. Everybody else uses workers. He goes by the book. That's what I learned. That's what we're doing.
All right, so these are election wardens and election inspectors, and they'll work at both the special town meeting and the town election?
Yes. Some not duplicate up, you know what I mean? Crisscross them, but those are essentially all of your people.
Very good. Well, thank you to all of them for volunteering. That's 2 long days they're
Very
giving
long
up in
days.
the
They're a
service
good
to the
group.
town, so I appreciate it. Gus, do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the list
Appoint.
excuse me. It says approve appointments. I move that we appoint the list of election wardens and election inspectors for the special town meeting and the special town election submitted by Town Clerk Marion Benaldi. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? All right. Well, congratulations to
Thank
the
you.
wardens/inspectors, and thank you very much, Marion. All right. I believe Town Moderator Scott McDermott is appearing remotely. Has he appeared?
He has not appeared yet.
Okay. All right. So I think we can move to our portions of the business, which is a vote to call the special town meeting, a vote to open the special town meeting warrant, and vote to close the warrant at the conclusion of the meeting, and a vote to sign the special town meeting warrant, and then we can welcome Scott, if he arrives, for that discussion. So first question is a vote to call the special town meeting. Pete, Gus, comments, discussion, motions.
I'm ready for a motion.
I do have comments.
All right.
As you know, from a couple of weeks ago, I raised concerns about scheduling this special town meeting, and having had, especially since over the last 3 weeks when we were talking about net zero a few weeks ago, I have had plenty of time to mull this over. And I am not in favor of us calling a special town meeting for the 7th. The main reason, as I've thought about this, I'm not at all convinced that we're not setting the town up for a failed vote. And I think the consequences of that failed vote are not good. Based on Tim Bonfatti's comments, my assessment is if that vote fails, we're another 5 or 6 years away from being able to put a school up, or likely to be another 5 or 6 years away. And I actually think we need a school, and we need it sooner rather than later. I'm not satisfied that the work has all been done that should be done for the town to really be prepared to vote on this. I think there's still even some work for the building committee to do around the financing. As you know, I have some tighter targets for what the total school cost should be. And I think that we have not really taken a hard look at how that total amount, if that is the total project, how it should be funded. We've just kind of thrown everything on the taxpayers' back to include the net zero cost. And for me, right at first I was worked up about that on a cost basis, but then I realized what I'm really worked up on is the impact on the taxpayers. And I think there's more work to be done to try to reduce that. So between that and some of the disagreements, I'm not convinced that it's a wise thing for us to call the meeting on the 7th.
Okay. Pete?
Gus, I guess I would ask you then, what do you see as the alternative way forward?
Well, I think I'm not saying don't have a town meeting at all on this project at all forever and ever. What I'm saying is I don't think we're ready for the town meeting yet. One piece that I think we should look at is to have the building committee take a hard look at the funding on how we're going about doing things. As I said, the net zero, we had a selectman from Lexington come in and basically say their entire net zero project for their school was covered through Eversource. And we found out 3 weeks ago that Eversource isn't putting a dime into any of the things that we're doing here. So I don't think we've explored that fully. There's a few other things around how we might finance some parts of this project that do not involve going on the tax levy. As I thought about it, I realized that the Wheelock school improvement terms, it makes sense to do it when we do the school, but that's actually not a school project. It's an additional capital improvement that we're building in there. And so there's some questions around how we would fund some of this that I don't think has been figured out. I'm not going to go, I think there are some open questions around what the school is and whether it really needs to be as big as it is based on projections of students and things like that. But I'm not really trying to open up that debate. I'm saying there's some open questions that could have an impact on the school and could potentially have an impact on people's support for the school that it would be worth taking more time to get to.
Okay. So what is your alternative proposal for funding the school?
Well, so something like 6 million, we're at 62 million. I mean, if you want me to give you a detailed plan for how to alternatively develop the school, I can't do that. I'll say right now that we're proposing 62 million in town funding, debt funding to cover the school. By the standard I had, that's 12 million too high. So you have to get 12 million off of the debt and on something else. 6 million of that, thereabouts, is money that if we were Lexington, and if we had taken a hard look at the net zero requirements, if Lexington could get their net zero program funded through Eversource, to me, that's 6 million that we just haven't really tried to get off the cost to the town. That's half of the 12. And the other one, I have some ideas on other things, but I'm not proposing that I know how to get the other 6 off. But I think it's possible to get the other 6 off.
Well, it's not just 6 though, right? I mean, it's.
I'm saying it's 12 million too high.
Right.
Right now, our
that's
net
the
zero
town
is 6.
share. It's the town share. So that you've got to actually shave like 18 million off the total project to shave 13 million off the town share.
Well, no, not all the things that might come up. Not really, because I'm talking about how we fund it. I'm not talking about what the cost of the school is.
Right.
So I'm not trying to say, let's not do net zero and make 6 million go away. I'm saying, let's figure out how to get 6 million covered by something other than town debt. It's still in on the project, so it doesn't affect the MSBA funding. There are some other things you could look at where we're putting money into things that the MSBA is not subsidizing. Those would be places to at least look at because they're not going to affect MSBA funding.
All right. I mean, and your view is that nobody tried to get money from Eversource.
Yes, and I'm not happy about that.
And what is the basis of your view that nobody tried to get money from Eversource?
When Mike Quinlan came in and I asked how is this being paid for, and the answer was completely by the debt on the project.
Right. And I mean, there is, I mean, that is the
what's
conclusion, but.
What's your view that Lexington was able to get the entire net zero covered by Eversource?
Right, I don't know that that's true. So, I mean, I have not necessarily accepted, I mean, I know that he's been held up as the guru of all gurus here. I've not necessarily accepted the Sandine analysis beyond the work that was done by the people who dug into this particular project. So it may well be that if Lexington got it all funded through Eversource, they had more political clout than we did. They had more of a sponsor there for us. There was some program they were able to participate in. I mean, I think this net zero issue was pretty thoroughly explored. And I think if there was free money available from somebody else, I'm fairly certain the people who are very interested in the net zero would have found that free money. And so I
I'm
don't.
not at all convinced that that's true.
I know,
That's what
I
meant
know,
about it.
and you're making a factual assertion that nobody tried to do it. And I don't know that that's factually true or not. But, all right, I understand where you're coming from. You don't want to call a town meeting until they've met your standard for the price of the project.
Until we've looked at it, yeah.
All right, well, we've looked at it, but,
Well,
I mean, it's,
I'm not convinced we have.
I am
Okay.
sure that's true.
Yeah.
Any comment, Pete?
Well, I think that the school has been vetted very thoroughly, and including the net zero issues. I just assumed that we were ready to go ahead. So,
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I am of the view as well that at this point we have vetted this as thoroughly as possible, and we are, as a town, I think this is the time to vote on it. And we've taken an extended period of time on this. We've had several delays to explore different pieces of this, and so I don't know what another 6 months is going to do. Right? I don't think another 6 months is going to have the people in the town in a position to accept the school that would look like what it would have to look like to meet your number. And so I don't think people would accept that school, to be honest with you. With
And
no
I'm saying-
cafeteria, no gym, no music room, no extra stuff, and all the stuff you'd have to get to shave $18 million off the project. Because I've asked these questions on this particular point, and that's the point at which what you're talking about. You're not talking about modest changes to the building.
So the main point, I guess I'm saying, is I'm not optimistic that we're going to get a successful vote, and because I'm not, I think this is the wrong time. We haven't set this up for success.
All right. Well, I mean, I guess we'll find out, right? I mean,
Well,
there's
that's,
only one way to find out, and I don't know that I've ever gone into
I think that's unfortunate. The attitude is you either prove this or something really bad is going to happen. I don't think that's the right setup for the taxpayers, the residents of the town. I think we ought to deal with the issues. I think there are a lot of people in town that are concerned about the tax impact, and there'll be an even larger number of people in town that'll be concerned about the tax impact, as they were after the overrides a few years ago, once they saw them. And I don't think that's a good place to leave the town if it does pass, and I don't think it's a good place to leave the town if it doesn't pass. So.
Okay. I mean, I think at this point, the people should have their say one way or the other. And I don't see a no vote as like this great catastrophe. I mean, I think if people vote no, there are consequences of a no, there are consequences of a yes. In any prudential, and that's what this is a prudential political judgment, right? This is not an existential question about A, B, or C. This is a prudential judgment about what's in the best interest of the town. With any prudential judgment, there are trade-offs. There are always upsides, there are downsides. When we went into the town meeting on the state hospital, I don't think we had a guarantee that the zoning was going to pass. And when we went in, we've gone into a lot of town meetings with important questions with uncertainty about the outcome, and that's the nature of having the town meeting as a legislative body rather than trying to preempt it ourselves and say, we're just going to decide ourselves, we're not going to do this now until we meet whatever requirements you have. And you've been clear throughout this process as to what those requirements were. I think from the school buildings committee's perspective, we would love for the building to be cheaper. I would love to have met the number.
Let me be clear. The issues I have on cost will be issues that will drive whether or not I vote to recommend approval of the article. The issue I have here on the table tonight is I do not believe that we are headed down a path that's likely to lead us to a successful vote. I don't believe we have set this issue up in the way that we normally set issues like this up in Medfield, where people have had adequate time for respectful dialogue, and in this particular case, it's become more polarized. And as I've thought it through, I've said part of what I think has not happened is the building committee developed a plan and came up with a cost. The piece that hasn't been taken care of yet is looking hard at the alternative ways to generate the funds to cover that full cost. It's just the default is put it on the backs of the taxpayers. And I think there's a good number of taxpayers who maybe aren't ready to support that. And that all contributes to why I don't think there's going to be a 2/3 majority.
Right. Well, that may be true, and then we'll have an answer to that question. I just don't think that another 6 months is going to, generate more free money. I mean, I just don't think that the free money, I mean, there's always the free money option, and it's always much more attractive to think of somebody else paying for the stuff we want. A lot of times, that's just not how it actually works. And so, I mean, if the idea is we're going to take 6 more months to find more free money, then, we're not going to find more free money. And so I think at this point, we have had a long period of discussion, and I think people deserve a chance to vote. I think the people who are against it deserve a chance to have their view prevail, if that's it, and have an answer on it. I just don't know that 6 or 9 more months is going to generate a grand consensus, particularly if the people we're most hearing from are the people on both sides who feel the most strongly about it. I don't think for the people on either end of it who feel the most strongly are ever going to come around and say, you know what, now this thing has now persuaded me when these other 75 things haven't. So I think for the vast majority of people, the vast majority of people in town who we have not heard from will have an opportunity to be a participant. It may well be that you're right, and you'll be correct, and you can come back on November 16th.
I'll take no satisfaction from being right.
Okay, whether you do or you don't, and I'll take no satisfaction in being wrong. But I think to have another 6 to 9 months of this, I don't think you're going to get. First, I don't think you're going to get free money in that period, and I don't think you're going to get improved, more respectful dialogue in the next 6 to 9 months if we drag this period on further. And so I think, and if you look to history, you look the last time we did a school project, it was very divisive and controversial, and there were multiple votes, and it failed one time, and they had to go back and vote again. So
Yes,
I think
and
when you have a project of this,
the people who opposed that first failure you're referring to, the seniors, were the very first ones who got up and spoke in favor of the alternative because they'd all been brought in and it came back together. This is not the same as the last school project. The only thing that might be the same about it is if we're saying, look, this is what it is, either you take it or turn it down, and we're going to come back a year later and you're going to get a worse school for the same price. That's a threat. That's not an option.
we don't know that, right? But there are facts, though, Gus, right? I mean, there are facts that that's a possibility. That is what happened with the DPW garage. Now, you can say that's a threat, or it's a fact, right? Or it's a possibility, and you don't know, right? It's a prudential judgment about what's going to happen. And to me, at this point, even if I agreed with you on the substance, which I obviously don't, I wouldn't substitute my judgment to say, I'm not going to give the 1,500 or 2,000 people who are going to come out to town meeting an opportunity to have their say on it. If they have their say against it, then they do, and that's the way. That's the way it works. That's democracy.
My point isn't to prevent them from having their say. My point is that as selectmen, we should call the town meeting at the point in time when we think we've done the best we can, when the taxpayers do come and have their say, that they're informed, we've done what we can to address the issues of concern. I don't think we're there yet. You, I guess, are saying, well, it's not going to get any better than this. I'm saying I don't think this is going to lead to a successful outcome.
What I'm saying is I don't see 6 to 9 months shaving $18 or $19 million off the project or finding
you're making numbers up.
Gus, I'm not making numbers up.
I've already said why I think we can do that. You're saying I don't think we can do that, and you've raised the number by 50% over what we need to do. We don't need to have that discussion.
No, Gus, your position has been
yes,
that you want it to be $50 million town contribution, right? And that the proposal...
It's not my position. You two, if you look at the town goals, the goals that we collectively approved, and you look in the financial goals, take a look at our own goals. Our own goals say that we will not have debt that leads the total debt of this town to exceed the town budget. This is not me just picking numbers out of nowhere. This is me standing up for the town goals that we approved 4 years ago.
Okay, terrific. And I disagree with you. I think it's a goal, and I think it's not faced with this prudential choice, I think this is a better alternative than the alternative. And I'm not trying to, put words in your mouth, but if you're going to talk about getting it from a $63 million town contribution to a $50 million town contribution, it's not necessarily just a reduction of $13 million. It may be a larger reduction because part of the overall budget is the MSBA contribution, of which the town is a percentage.
Or it may not
And so-
be a reduction in the cost, it may be using other funds to pay for it.
And I appreciate that, and I just don't think that, I think, given the concern over cost in this project, that if there was an opportunity to get other sources of funding, it would have been identified. I just don't accept the notion that there's a bunch of free money that's been left on the
I think we've
table.
both stated our position. I am not convinced of the concern over cost. You don't believe there's any opportunities there. That's fine. We have different views. I don't believe this town meeting will lead to a successful conclusion. The two of you either think it might, or you think it won't, but it'll serve people right. It's okay. I've stated my position. I think this is the wrong time.
Yeah, I don't know if it will or it won't. I'm not placing any bets on it. I think people deserve a chance to vote on this project, and that's what I think we should do. So Pete, do we have a motion to vote to call a special town meeting?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Yes.
Aye, opposed?
Nay.
All right, and do you want to move to vote to open the special town meeting warrant? And then we'll close it at the conclusion of the meeting?
Having two selectmen vote for the town meeting, I will, in fact, vote in favor of the next two. So
Right.
I move that we vote to open the special town meeting warrant.
You moved to.
He's moving, yeah, you had a second.
Yes.
I thought you said you voted.
No, you got a second.
No, I said I
All in
move.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And vote to sign the special town meeting warrant.
I move that we sign the special town meeting warrant.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and I see Scott McDermott, the town moderator, has arrived live and in person, not on Zoom. Welcome, Scott. Would you like to have a microphone in the back, or would you like to have the podium in the front?
Switch glasses. How's everyone? Okay, so hello to everyone tonight. Hello to everyone here. Hello to everybody who might be viewing at home, and a particular hello to all those people that might watch this on video, as I've been watching dozens and dozens of meetings over the past 18 months, or listening to them on my headsets as I walk around on Medfield TV and YouTube channel. So appreciate all of that, and appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk a little bit about the guidelines and procedures for town meeting. So with the closing of the warrant tonight, there's a kind of a transfer of responsibility in some respects from the selectmen to the moderator. Now, normally for annual town meeting, this happens at the end of January, early February, when the warrant is closed, and at that point we start to do our planning for the annual town meeting. Here we just have a little less than 3 weeks from the closing of the warrant to the conducting of the special town meeting. So I'm really pleased to be here and to be able to talk a little bit about these guidelines and procedures. So beginning from now on, I suppose, when we close the meeting, it becomes the responsibility of the moderator to orchestrate the meeting and then to preside over the proceedings on November 7th. A little bit of an advance of that, I do want to express the honor and pleasure that I'll have of inviting folks and encouraging all registered voters of the town of Medfield to attend and participate in what I think is a very special town meeting. We are an open town meeting form of government. That means from our town charter, the legislative authority of the town shall be vested in the town meeting, open to all registered voters. So that goes to the very nature of the form of our government. Sometimes, as I kind of read commentary, that seems to be a little bit lost on folks that that's what we are. The town meeting is not an event so much as it is an entity, in the same way that a state legislature is an entity, or Congress or the Senate is an entity. And it's also a process, and this process in this instance, has been going on for a long time, and I think people are now ready and enthusiastic to have the meeting and to make the determinations. I think of town meeting as a direct, democratic, participatory self-government. Direct meaning that it's not representative. Democratic meaning it's by and for the people. Participatory meaning that those registered voters who come are the legislators. It's charged with making laws and decisions, and in this particular case, with making appropriations. And actually, it's quite a unique and revered institution where lawmaking actually occurs by an assembly of the voters. That is very, very unique around the world. So, for me, I cherish it, and I think we should appreciate it as we go forward to become part of this entity and we work through this process. It is not perfect. In fact, it is imperfect. I think we've proven that sufficiently over time that it's not perfect. But it does mean we must come together, we speak with one another, we listen, we deliberate, and ultimately we express our point of view by voting. It's a very pure form of democratic governance. One of the things great about being the town moderator is that I have the honor of writing a short letter published each spring in the first page of our annual warrant report. Each year I speak about Medfield being a special place. From this year's warrant report, I said, here in Medfield, I believe we have a special place to call our home. We are a community. We share common purpose. We value education, community, open space, safe streets and homes, the well-being of the young and the old, quality municipal service, the advancement of local commerce. We always talk about how it takes hard work, open and active communication, and a deep commitment to the town's best interest to achieve these common objectives. So I think that this is something for us to bear in mind as we think about heading into this meeting, and it will certainly be something for us to bear in mind as we come out of the meeting. This notion of community. I'm a big proponent of civic engagement, so I want to commend everybody. I can't imagine a situation where we would have had more civic engagement. My life personally has been enriched by the people I've met, the experience I've had, and the lessons that I've learned by being engaged in Medfield, so I commend the engagement on this issue of all of the people from all sides of the question, volunteers and individuals. I do want to speak to volunteers, looking out at many of the volunteers, people throughout this entire situation who come to this as volunteers. I always tell people that I feel like I have a special place to speak for volunteers because I'm probably the only volunteer that each year presides over a formal vote that sets his salary at zero. And so speaking on behalf of everybody, I thank all the people who have been volunteering as a part of this process on the committees, as individuals expressing their point of views. So that's it. So now talking about a little bit, I always speak to where I get my guidance from and where I get the capacity to be able to exercise my discretion as moderator at town meeting. And I put the emphasis that this comes from the use of my best judgment, principles of fairness, principles of expedience and prudence, consideration of the best interests of our community, and past precedents in the administration of town meeting. We operate free from the technicalities of strict parliamentary procedure. The town elects its moderator each year, and it's to a one-year term. So I am elected to exercise my judgment and my discretion with good faith. I looked up the definition of good faith, and good faith is the honesty of intention. So, I expressed today, I'll express again, and I think that hopefully people can be confident that it is my honest intention to conduct a right down the middle of the fairway meeting. It's a challenge, I'll do my best. I actually appreciate special town meetings because it gives us the opportunity to be able to concentrate on a single article or a small cadre of articles. It's a little more difficult when there are 37 articles on the agenda and there's a lot of movement. You have to be thinking always ahead about how much time do you have to be able to address the articles that are remaining, particularly if you're using the lottery system. So this enables me as moderator and all of the folks who gather to be able to put their focus on the issue that is at hand, and I think that's good. The words that have been coming to my mind during the course of preparing for this are convergence and complexity. This is a complex undertaking. Convergence, well, what's convergence? Convergence of these various forces. we're still, COVID has been a force. The last two times that we gathered as towns, we gathered outside on the turf. We have a compelling, maybe a once-in-a-generation type of issue. We had it a generation ago when I was much younger. It is addressing the education in our children. It is fiscally strategic. It's all happening in a social and a political climate that is often negative and sometimes divisive and often mistrustful, and sometimes in ways that I don't really recognize some of the elements of the town that we've come to know over 30 years living here and 25 years as an elected official. In terms of the complexity, the way that I'm approaching this is the way that I used to talk to my students about. We look for the simplicity on the far side of complexity. We can't approach this in a simple kind of a way. This is not a simple undertaking. On the other hand, there's a lot of complexity out there. Look at the postings that the Warren Committee has been so attentive to and has given such a resource to the town. But it's a complex compendium of a lot of videos, a lot of articles, a lot of documents, and so it's not easy. So for me, when I try to get to the simplicity on the far side of complexity, I look at this meeting with really 5 major things to be thinking about. The first one is the registration. It's very important for us to be rigorous in the registration. I'll talk a little bit about that. The second one is the logistics and the venues. The third is the article, the presentation of the motion and the comments on the motion. Number 4 is the discussion and the deliberation, and number 5 will be the vote. So those are really the kind of the 5 elements that are on my mind. Those are the 5 elements that are on my mind when I wake up and sometimes as I lay in bed. So let's talk about registration. Attendance is limited to the registered voters and the visitors that we invite and approve by a vote at the meeting to sit within the open town meeting. So, and that's mandated by our charter. Some of it is actually addressed by state law as well. A registration will be conducted through a common location at or near the front entrance of the high school. Every attendee is required to check in through registration, and that will be administered by our town clerk, Marion Benaldi, and her staff. And so there will be even more specific guidance, but as we look at weather could be a factor in that as well. Will we be able to do any of this setup outside? But generally it will be at or near right at the front entrance of the high school. We have done registration before. So I'm encouraging all registered voters to come, but anybody that does come, I'm asking them to please make sure that they go. It's going to be important. It's going to be necessary, in fact, based on the system and the processes that we're establishing for them to come through registration. Not sure. I'll be open to questions on any of that. I'm interested in everybody there being there. I'm interested in specifically in certain constituencies. I want to make sure that our seniors feel comfortable coming to our special town meeting. There's a bus from the Council on Aging. I met with Chief Guerrero yesterday to talk about, and with Mo to talk about designated parking spaces in front of the school. We talked to Kathy Thompson yesterday of the Board of Health about having wheelchairs available because, as we know, it's a long corridor to get down to the gym. We will, as I'll talk about a little bit in a second when we talk about venues, we will designate a space that for people who feel that they have any particular kind of vulnerability or susceptibility relative to COVID and would feel safer in a de-densified space where there can be a little more spacing. So that is going to be the library, and so any seniors that are feeling in that way, we would make that space available to them. I'd like to provide whatever accommodations we can to encourage seniors to come. I'd like to look out. I always like to look out and, of course, see John Harney and Ann Thompson and Caroline Stanley and folks like that who, really, for my generation, those were the people that had established the foundation that we built on and that is being built on again by another generation. That's the great part about Medfield. Another constituency, parents of young children. We are encouraging apparatuses of childcare and babysitting to be set up. I'm not completely sure what arrangements have been made. but any kind of support that I can provide to that, I'm willing to do. Questions have arisen this fall and in the past about bringing young children to town meeting, and this is not permitted. And in fact, in our meeting yesterday with the Board of Health, we have met with the chairman of the Board of Health twice in the last 2 weeks, and yesterday we met with the entire Board of Health, and their commentary was that it would be a very bad idea for anyone to bring a child to town meeting. It would be a bad idea for the child and for the other folks, and all of their guidance would discourage that, and it will not be permitted. But any senior or any parent who feels disadvantaged in any way, I would encourage them to reach out to me directly, and they can reach out to me directly through the town administrator's office or through the town clerk's office. And in my postscript, as I'll talk about, happy to talk about anybody and helping to see if I can do anything to try to support them to come to town meeting.
But when you're mentioning about the Board of Health suggesting that bringing children to the town meeting wouldn't be a good idea, is it?
That's not what they said. They said it would be a very bad idea. Just to clarify that. It's not that it wouldn't be a good idea.
Okay.
And it was unanimous amongst the board.
Yeah, okay. But is that discouraging people if there's childcare set up in the building from bringing children into the building?
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, not only do they not want childcare set up in the building, but we actually even talked about using high school students to be able to assist and support some of the logistics of it, and they don't want us to do that as well, just simply because its contact tracing would be very, very difficult through a town meeting, and those students have to get reintroduced into an environment that we're trying very, very hard to keep safe all of the time. So. That's the guidance that we got. I don't know if, Christine, if you want to add anything to that in terms of, but it was probably, we spent a long time on the phone with them to talk about conducting this meeting as safely as we possibly could, and I don't think there was anything that they were more definitive about than that particular point. We talked about ventilation, we talked about every kind of a component of being able to, masks will be required. Inside the school.
Windows will be open. We had talked about even bringing in some volunteers. Carol Reed had voluntold, I guess, some people from Needham to come over, and the Board of Health agreed that would not even be advisable. If it's a Medfield town meeting, we should be keeping it to those that are working and part of that. So Scott just blew my cover and told my department heads that they will be actually working at town meeting. So
yeah. We're gonna need that because again, it is complex. We want to be able to provide support, and as we kind of go further, you'll see how that complexity will roll out. But happy to answer any questions about any of that. And when Kelly and I came to town, Courtney was 6 and Dylan was 4 and Jack was 2. I don't remember how we did it, but it happened to be at a time. You remember, Bill, there were a lot of issues that were big. We had some of our record-breaking attendance at town meeting during those particular years. It's never easy, and I don't mean to in any way imply either for a senior to get to our town meeting and have to to get and be comfortable in that environment, or for anyone who has young children, I don't think that is easy as well. But
So Mike, I had said at the outset, Scott, that I was not going to take public input at this portion of the meeting. You're going to be. I was told you're going to be at the Warren hearing next week.
I am.
Yeah, and I think that would be a good opportunity for people to speak to you about that. And your email address for people who want to email you directly, because I think you have an official Town of Medfield email address.
Town moderator at.
Town moderator at something.
I have so many email addresses.
it's actually Medfield Town Moderator at Medfield.
Medfield Town Moderator at Medfield.net, just in the interest of getting this whole summary out. And then people can reach out to you and they'll be able to speak to you next week at the Warren hearing. I thought that was what I said at the beginning.
I will be circulating guidelines that I've drafted that support what I'm saying here tonight.
Medfield's Town Moderator.
Medfield.
Medfield.
All one word, Town Moderator.
Town Moderator.
At Medfield.net.
Yes.
So questions about the conduct of town meeting. As Scott said, after this meeting tonight, he takes control of the town meeting. So questions about the conduct of town meeting directed to Medfield Town Moderator at Medfield.net.
And just as easily, actually, to reach out to Christine's office or to Marion's without, but who will direct them to my attention, not to be responsive,
Who do
but.
you think's checking the Medfield Town Moderator email?
All right,
So-
so that was item 1 and 2, or is we 1.5? Where are we on the?
No, that's we're 1.5.
Okay.
So I was told that I had as much time as I needed.
You
so-
absolutely do. I'm just trying to keep track of, you have
No,
the
we're down to
scorecard.
2.
Yeah,
We're on to
scorecard here.
logistics and venues.
Yeah.
So the main venue will be the gym. The gym holds somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 people. Although I know that when we had 1,000 people at our last special town meeting, I also discovered partway through the meeting that we had a couple hundred people in the cafeteria, so some of it has to do with spacing, but the first overflow will be to the cafeteria. We're going to have further overflow that will be to the auditorium. We will also have the library prepared for anyone with heightened concern, as I mentioned. There will be limited seating, less density, and more spacing. And we have to try to manage that space. The Board of Health used an expression called the worried well. I don't know how you discourage the worried well from using space as opposed to people who have genuine concerns about comorbidities and other factors that make them more susceptible, but we would like to use that space for people who have, a very genuine concern.
Scott, are there going to be any outdoor?
Yes, so we are arranging a proximate outdoor space, and it will be of limited size. It won't be like our turf, and it won't be the turf, in fact. It will be of limited size, and it will not be able to accommodate everyone. It will provide us an option, and it will also allow us to extend enough space to expend our capacity up to and beyond 2,000 people. And of course, one of the variables is weather on November 7th, so, which is uncertain. Going back in time, I did look at weather charting and what happens to New England weather, and I went back and looked at the last 10 years of November 7th, and we've had pretty much every condition from snow to warm weather on the 7th of November, so it's too soon to start looking now, but in another week or so, we'll start paying a little bit of attention to what that will be all about. The article and the motion, its presentation and comments comes next. This is the third of the 5 elements. The positive main motion will be made by the warrant committee if they are in favor of the article. If the warrant committee is opposed to the article, the positive main motion will be made by the proponent of the article, the school building committee. We will then hear reports and commentary from the warrant committee. There is likely to be majority and minority reports, and so they will have those reports. They may be more extensive than they've been in the past, and I think that's merited. They've put an enormous amount of time into studying this question and helping to support the town's understanding of all of these issues, these complex issues, so the warrant committee will report. After the warrant committee provides its report, there will be a presentation of reasonable length by the sponsor of the article, the school building committee. I will talk to the school building committee. I don't know how long specifically, but that would be in the range of 12 to 15 minutes, I'd say, in order for them to be able to do that presentation. We will then turn to the Board of Selectmen, who will have an opportunity to comment and express their views. After the Selectmen comment, then we will open this to discussion and deliberation by those attending. I've been using the expression that this meeting is about closing arguments as opposed to opening arguments, using a kind of a trial metaphor perhaps, but we'd like to think of this as closing arguments, and so as people prepare to speak or think about speaking, they should be highlighting some of the key points and not providing perhaps as much background as they might ordinarily feel that they need to do. It's not a review of all of the elements of the decision. It's not about personal opinions at this particular time. We're trying to get people to speak who believe that they can be persuasive and can add something to the deliberation of the other people who are at the meeting.
Scott,
Yes.
have you made a determination whether people will all have to go to the gym to speak, or will they be speaking from wherever they are?
I think that they will be speaking from wherever they
They will
are.
be speaking from wherever they are.
Spending a lot of time trying to, get our arms around the technology of all of this with that particular question in mind, that we have to have two-way communications from each of the venues that we established. So it looks like we would have 5 venues if we included the gym and the cafeteria and the library and the auditorium and some outdoor space. We've looked at numbers. Marion was good enough to go back and to track all of the numbers back to the 1990s. We've had town meetings in town, several that have gone well over 1,000, and I can't remember the year, but we had one that was 2,343 people. So when we did our walkthrough yesterday at the high school, and we get great support. Chris Allen, who's not going to be here this time because he's going to be doing his professional work at a soccer game, but he's connected us with Thistle Communications, who will help to support us with the technology. They're quite expert. They've done complicated town meetings at towns all around eastern Massachusetts. Provided a lot of confidence to us that we can get the technology right. When you do what I do, the one thing you can do a lot of preparation, but all of a sudden if the light doesn't work or if the cameras go down, then that undercuts a lot of what you're doing. So we're going to spend a lot of time in the next couple of weeks to try to get the production values, if you will, the presentation values for the people who are, in attendance, to be able to have the best presentation from the studio, the gym, as we project out to those people. But I think that, so from what I understand, the way it's been described to me, there will be somebody that will be in front of me with a headset on that will be connected to assistant moderators that will be in each of the venues, who will be communicating with that person, who will be signaling to me about people who are opponents and proponents who are in these other venues. My expectation is that we would be in the gym, we would go to proponents and opponents at separate microphones. After maybe 10 of those, I will be listening or being directed to the fact that there are people at microphones in these other venues, and we'll try to go around those venues and to get commentary. We'll see how all of that work. All speakers will be timed and comments will be timed in the gym, and I will be communicating the timing to those other venues. So this is a little bit of a innovation. I'm often criticized, often rightfully criticized, for this notion of trying to allow people to be able to have the time. But the expectation in this meeting is that a lot of people may want to have the opportunity to be able to speak to the town, and since that's what makes it a town meeting, this gathering, the opportunity to speak to town, I'd like to provide as many people that opportunity, but we will limit the amount of time that people will speak, likely starting with 2 minutes for the first tranche of speakers and then reducing that by a minute. And as always, all discussion will be directed through the moderator, and so that will be the kind of whether it's coming from one of these satellite venues or whether it's coming from the gym. I will ask at the beginning that people speak through me as opposed to speaking to others or debating with one another. I think I say this most of the time, because we are conducting these closing arguments and we expect a very large crowd, and I don't think we expect to go on forever and ever in that afternoon. Not everyone will have a chance to speak. So, I'm going to apologize beginning tonight, and I'll start my apologies again and again in advance for anybody that does not get the opportunity to speak. At some point, I need to close down the discussion in the best interest of getting to the vote. I'm going to ask everybody to stand for civility. To me, the tone of the dialogue matters. For years, when people have asked me, what's the responsibilities of the town moderator, I talk about conducting the town meeting, making the appointments to the warrant committee, and helping to be a part of the folks that set the tone for our discourse in town. I believe in decorum, and so I'm going to try to enforce that as best I can at the town meeting. I want to maintain mutual respect amongst the people that participate. Absolutely try to eliminate any personal attacks. Ask everybody to speak with care, engage their emotional intelligence, focus on facts. Do not lightly tread on folks' integrity. Agree to disagree. First seek to understand and then be understood. And also try to reflect a little bit on history and the heritage of this town. We've made a lot. If you go back, Richard DeSorga has tuned me into this, but you go back over time and look at the momentous decisions that have been made by town meeting over time, that could be decisions about expenditures like this, and we had a chance to be the seat of county government at one time in Medfield. It was a town meeting vote, in fact, that led to Millis, seeking to the west side of the Charles River, breaking off from this side of the Charles River, and also at various times conscription, and we have sent soldiers off to war through town meeting action. So there are some very, very big things that have happened in town meeting. This is one for our ages, but we don't want to lose sight of the fact that there's often been difficult decisions that have been made before. The vote. So I will call the question after reasonable discussion, deliberation, and debate. That's a judgment. I tell people that the judgment is usually made by my sense from the podium of the fact that about half of the people there think that I'm letting this go on too long, and about half of the people think there should be more opportunity to speak. When I get right to that point, it's likely that I will be calling the question. When the question is called, it will be voted to call the question by a clear voice vote in all venues. When that happens, then registration will be closed. So at that point, we will close registration. All venues will be sealed. The people that we're helping with registration will have to help us with the voting process. No one will be permitted entry after the registration is closed. After the call of the question has been made, it has been voted in the affirmative, then the town clerk will close the registration. All venues will be sealed, and we will get down to the process of voting. And no one would be permitted entry at that time, absent any kind of exigency. The vote at this special town meeting will be by ballot. And obviously, many of you I've talked to you about this. I've had given this issue lots of consideration over the years, had many discussions around pros and cons. Generally, I like private ballots the most when they're appropriate for elections or referendums as opposed to legislative activity. But I think because of the reasons that I described when I was talking about convergence, certainly the appeals that have been made to me by citizens in town for this special town meeting, I find what I call a distinction with a difference. This is whenever you have precedent, and I have precedent, I've been doing this for 19 years, in order to maybe move a little bit away from precedent, you have to find that this is a different circumstance, and to find that distinction, and I have found that distinction. I believe this is a different circumstance. Some of it has to do with neighbor versus neighbor, some of it has to do with the scale of the meeting, some of it has to do with the fact it's being conducted in the environment that we're conducting it in COVID, and so forth. The combination of all of those factors that create the convergence and the complexity that I was referencing led me to the fact that I think that we should undertake this vote by ballot, and therefore it provides some of the benefits of anonymity that people enjoy, and we hope that it will also provide us with an exact count at the end, and in a way that I think is going to be important to defend, and so we'll have a process that will be open in that respect, and at the end of the day, we should have an absolutely accurate count. Many people will occasionally ask me, why don't we just come to the town meeting and vote? And I say, well, that's actually not what a town meeting is, because it's based, in my view, on this first having this discussion and the deliberation and the opportunity to be persuaded and so forth. But in this instance, we have the benefit of both. We're going to vote twice. So we're going to vote once in a legislative context through a legislative process on November 7th, and then on November 15th, we're going to vote by ballot, which is a different kind of a process, preferred by many. So folks will have the opportunity to be able to vote in both of those manners, or to vote in one of those. This is parenthetical, but I've been interested in years in technology and in how it can be used in town meeting. We've looked at electronic voting. It's a deep and continuing review. In fact, last winter I asked 7 individuals from town, former Warren Committee members, respected members of the town. Marion Benaldi was on that, Nick, and what we did is we just kind of looked deeper into the question. We looked deeper into the research, what other towns were doing. We looked at the technology, we looked at the needs, we looked at the costs and the impact on the institution of town meeting. We talked to a number of moderators and town clerks. I talked to town moderators in Manchester by the Sea and Hingham and Wellfleet and a bunch of other towns, some who use electronic voting, some who don't. There are pros and cons, and we kind of came to the conclusion that the first time we did it, it wasn't going to be at this special town meeting. I can tell you that much with the technology situation. I heard one town that went to, for their first COVID town meeting, they went to electronic voting for the first time. And you rent these devices, and they're not inexpensive. And there's an enormous time and cost to getting them set up and calibrated and getting them right. But they have the advantages of electronic voting. But what happened was that when they were wiping them down to sanitize them, they had tested them and they had retested them, and they had tested them as right up to the morning of the vote. But when the last thing they did was they sanitized them, and when they sanitized them, that process changed the channels on a bunch of the clickers. And so at the town meeting, they discovered they had 280 clickers of the whole batch that were not working properly.
That's what comes, Scott, from not allowing teenagers in to help.
That's right, exactly.
If you had the kids in there, they definitely could have got it going.
That's why we have to get past COVID, so we get the teenagers back and help us with our technology, for sure. So I will be publicizing and hold a forum, on the future of town meetings in January to talk about the future of our town meeting. I'm a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to town government, but, most of my professional life outside of this is dedicated to managing and navigating continuous improvement and often transformational change. Big believer in you figure out, you preserve the core, and then you stimulate change for the rest. And so that'll be something that I will be bringing to the town sometime after we get through the holidays.
Scott, may I ask a question?
Yes.
About that. So the paper, where you mentioned there'll be a paper ballot, like a ballot you mark. How will that work?
Yeah. So
We're calling it a vote card.
Yeah, we're calling it a
Vote
vote
card
card to distinguish it from the ballot that will be, and I like that better because it won't be a ballot. It will be, so people, we're working on exactly the mechanism to make sure we make the connection from registration to the vote, and that is something that we can preserve the sanctity of and the integrity of. So some of that is still being worked on, but it will happen within each of the venues. I expect that people will get a vote card. They will likely, looks like it's going to be a yes or no, so that makes it good for us. They will mark yes or no. They will drop the vote card in a box. After all the venues have gone through, people have dropped their vote card at that venue. We'll put a short pause. Those boxes will be taken to a central location. We will designate some folks to be counters, and we will have observers, and those will be counted, and then we will come back, and the last part of the town meeting will be to announce the results of the vote.
People will be able to leave after they vote, or
yes.
To stay?
As long as we maintain a quorum. I think I'm hoping that people will hang around. We'll play some music, maybe make some commentary. We'll figure out what we do in that time frame.
I heard the Patriots game is on.
You heard that? I did hear that too.
I've heard the Patriots game.
I've heard more about the Patriots, an away game against the Panthers.
I keep getting lots of emails about it.
Very aware of that, and I was trying to do the math as I was driving out here and said, if this Red Sox series goes 7 and they get to the World Series and it's a 7-game series, is there a possibility that the convergence gets even more profound by the 7th game of a World Series on November 7th? I'm trying to.
Goes that far.
No, it won't go that long? Okay, good.
Plus, those games don't start before like 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah, that's right. That's when they'll start them, right? I don't think we'll have a conflict at noontime. I will be appearing, postscript, I will be appearing with the Warrant Committee next Tuesday night at their Warrant Committee hearing. I will be staying on at the end of the meeting when we will open the forum. The plan is to, by Zoom, for anybody in town, any voter, to ask any questions of me as the moderator relative to the conduct of the special town meeting. Christine, you and I only talked loosely about this, but I'm happy to set up another forum or another Zoom in the week before the town meeting in order to be able to respond to any questions. It's really imperative that we go into this meeting with as much clarity about the procedures and guidelines that I've just tried to outline. Whether it comes to registration and having that be done absolutely as securely as we possibly can, the presentation of the motion, so that that's well understood, the discussion and the deliberations and the vote. And so, that's obviously very important to me. I'm available to any and every voter in town over the next 3 weeks to answer. At my email address is a good way to connect with me, or to...
We have that one more time.
We have that one more
Be
time.
the Medfield Town Moderator at medfield.net.
Thank you. Or reach out to the town administrator, the town clerk's office, and they will get you connected to me. And then finally, the final comment is, what happens after the meeting is almost as important as what happens at the meeting in many ways. I really feel strongly that we need to come together. I go back to this notion of Medfield being a special place. And when I say special place, it isn't because of the buildings that we've built, or not even the open space which I'm enjoying, or our youth sports, which many of us have participated in, and all these things that go on. But what has made Medfield such a special place is really the interaction of the people in town. And whether that's, I took a walk through Medfield Day. It was kind of, for me, it was very interesting, having gone there when I had a bunch of kids in little soccer uniforms, and now walking through with my sunglasses and just checking it out. But that's a very, very special kind of a thing, and it happens anytime there's a family in crisis in Medfield. You go on, all-night graduation parties, Medfield Foundation. I could point to everybody, and something that everybody's been involved in, that has really made this a special place. And I don't think we've inflicted harm on that element. But I will tell you that the saddest of all the commentary that I read are from people who have just moved into Medfield and are just getting exposed to the character of the town. And in some respects, the way they're being exposed to it is through some of the divisiveness or the negativity that they're hearing. It makes me feel sad, because honestly, I've been in this town for, more than a quarter of a century, and I never had any of those emotions. Quite the opposite, as I've always felt that there's the only limitation on the people that I'd like to know in this town is, frankly, is where my kids were at school. It's amazing to me that, I felt like I knew everybody of certain grades, but in the in-between grades, I didn't know people as well. And, I hope we can rekindle that, because, that's what makes this such a great, great place. And we need to re-engage as a community. And I always talk about the fabric of that community, and, all of these things, from open space to great schools to public safety to the well-being of the young and the old, to the downtown commercial activity that we have. It's the weaving together of all of that. It's a fabric, and that's how I think of community, as a fabric. And so, I certainly pledge myself to making sure that we continue to weave that together. So do you want no questions from?
Well, from us, but for public discussion, warrant committee next week. So Pete, questions, comments, discussion?
So, thank you very much, Scott. That was very thorough, very interesting. I appreciate it. One of the things that I've been mulling and thinking about is that we have a big decision about the state hospital, and I would love to hear the residents' opinion about the two proposals. And I'm wondering if there's some way to get a sense of the residents from either the special town meeting or the election on the 15th as to what their pleasure is to have the town do about the two proposals.
It's interesting, Pete, and that's a good question, a really good question, and it comes, it's the next freight train coming down the track. My own perspective is that, I looked at them when they came in, and I'm, as kind of reasonably involved as most, and I'm not there yet. So I don't know whether the town is there yet. I can't read the hearts and minds of the town as to whether they're ready to kind of start to provide you some information that would help to formulate that. But if there was a way of being able to, without confusing the issue, to take the temperature of the town, or if that makes sense, this is first impression for me, but I do know that it's another big issue that we have to deal with. I guess
it would just be a temperature of the town, as you say, but it would be very interesting to see what people's thinking is, whether they're interested
we would
in the
maybe
money
have
or the
time to do that while the votes are being counted, and so maybe that. what I don't want to do is confuse the issues, or and to kind of
So
It's one thing to weave together the...
25 hours of warrant committee meetings and read this before the
Yeah,
They can read that while we're
Professor
waiting.
Peterson wants more homework for everybody.
And Mark has pointed out the fact that, I mean, that's the whole idea of closing the warrant. The warrant is the warning as to what's going to be talked about at town meeting. Not that we would be taking any action if we were to take the temperature, but
I think it's confusing.
It's confusing.
And the election ballot's already been printed and set, so we can't do that at the election.
okay, well, good question. One that I wasn't prepared to answer as much as I prepared today.
That was the only issue that I...
Any other thoughts, Gus?
Scott, my only question is, with your comments about Medfield Day and Christian Donner sitting in the back of the room, I want to know how come you didn't arrest the moderator like you arrested us?
A few people we couldn't find.
He said he was wearing his sunglasses.
Yeah, I've been dunked in a dunk pool, and I've had, pies put in my face at Medfield Day, but I've never been subject to arrest so far, so.
Well,
Did you violate some local ordinance or something, or was it
Apparently.
just? Yes, you...
We were thinking independently.
Okay, well, that could be a high crime. Any,
Your last comment, your comments overall, you already know, I can't, for anybody that's listening to this, I won't be in light of our earlier discussion, the fact that I'm not going to be at the town meeting has nothing to do with any of that. I had a prior commitment that was set at the beginning of the year. So just so people wondering why I'm not there, it's got nothing to do with the issues. But the more you talk, the more I'm sorry I'm going to miss it, because it's so much fun to watch you try to manage a complex, difficult town meeting. And this one with people in different rooms, it's like, maybe I can find a way to get back early or something.
I'm excited for the meeting because of it being a culmination of a process in which so much time has been devoted to it. I'm a believer that reasonable people can disagree, but I I have a lot of trust in the town. I have a lot of trust in the voters, and at some point, we kind of take our leave and we run a meeting, we try to provide the information, and then we trust the voters to come. And I do believe in the legislative process, and I think it's for all of us to be part of a legislature. As I said, how unique it is to actually have voters assemble to make laws and to do appropriations directly. There's not too many forms of government anywhere in the world that actually have those kind of characteristics with them, and we do. So you can tell I've had to defend town meeting quite a few times at quite a few cocktail parties over the years. But I am a believer, but I do, maybe we start talking about January and how it continues to evolve so that it, remains relevant and meets the needs of the town.
Anything else, Chris? So just to recap a little bit here, so to go through your 5 points. I mean, first, so the registration is going to take place kind of as it typically does for town meeting. It'll
Should be fairly similar from a point of locale. We're going to try to, with the advice of the Board of Health, or we will try to spread it out a little bit. So we're trying to alleviate any clogging, and try to get people in as soon as possible, encourage people to come early and know that that we are expecting a significant crowd. So.
So what time will you anticipate an opening? 11
I
o'clock?
think we talked
somewhere
about
there?
registration starting as early as 11 o'clock.
Okay, all right.
So,
And then
yeah.
that'll be typical, and that will close when you call the question for the vote.
Registration will close not when I call the question, when I put it to a vote, and by a voice vote, if I decide it's in the affirmative, at that point, we will then close.
So you will ask for a voice vote on whether to put it to a vote?
Yes.
Okay, and then once you think that's yes?
That won't be coming from, generally speaking, it's, not so much of a motion from the floor. This is going to be, at the point where the moderator recognizes that it's the appropriate time to do that.
Right. Okay, and then for inside the town meeting, it'll be the gym, the auditorium, the library,
Cafeteria?
cafeteria, and then there'll be an outdoor,
There'll be an outdoor.
some sort of tented outdoor area option
Yep.
for people to have, okay?
We're looking at, remember, we have to run fiber optic cable to each of
No,
those
I'm just trying to make
venues.
sure I get all of this,
Yeah.
all of this down. So that's where we're going to be, and people will be able to speak wherever they are. So they won't have to come anywhere else to speak.
Correct.
It'll be hooked up electronically to be broadcast into the other rooms.
Yep.
You went through the order of the presentation. Then for deliberation,
Those locusts is too-
I'm sorry.
They're gonna vote
They are going to vote in the venues. Yeah,
Deliberation.
the venues will be closed upon the closing of registration and the calling of the vote. The voting will go on in each of those venues. At that point, the ballot box will be taken from the venue to a central place.
Okay. And then for the speaking portions, you'll have a clock for 2 minutes for people, and that, you'll administer that centrally on that. And then the voting will be by paper ballot administered by the town clerk. Is
Voting
that the-
card, yep.
Vote card, yes.
Vote card. Not ballot.
Not ballot.
Vote card. Vote card by the town clerk. And then you'll announce the vote, and the meeting will be dissolved at that
That'll
point.
be it.
And it sounds like the,
Really simple when you say it like that.
It's just A, B, C, D, right? That's not,
Right.
and it sounds like the registration's going to be outside the building?
That'll be weather depending. We are going to ask everybody to be patient. There may be some waiting in line outside because the Board of Health has asked us to limit people coming in to register so that we don't have a bottleneck right in that foyer area. So there could be some waiting outside. The Board of Health also suggested that people dress in layers. They are going to ask that we open all of the windows to the rooms as required under their protocol. So we will. It could be a little chilly.
So if
The 2,000 people.
But if the auditorium is being used, then the registration has to be before the corridor to the auditorium.
Yeah, we will come up with a way to ensure that everybody who is in a venue has gone
Yeah.
through registration.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
But there'll be one registration point.
one registration
And then
point.
you'll kind of proceed to wherever you're
right,
going.
and the auditorium will only be opened as an overflow after we have filled the other venues. So if
Yeah.
we don't fill the other venues, we won't be going to the
Right,
auditorium.
it won't be a choice of where you want to be unless you've identified as having a comorbidity or a senior citizen who would like to be in the library. Other than that, we will open the rooms as necessary.
Okay. All right. Well, Scott, thank you very much. People can email you, and they'll see you at the warrant hearing next Tuesday. Thank you very much. And the warrant hearing, where is that taking place? Here, right?
Public safety building.
Public safety. Oh, okay. Warrant hearing, public safety building. I see Christian Donner here. Are you here for the rail trail? All right. Well, I'll move you ahead of the next two, which could take a while. So, not that you don't want to be here for the whole thing, but if you'd like to come and do your Zoppo proposal, we can do that.
James Goldstein is on Zoom and has a presentation as well.
Oh, a presentation.
I know he had another engagement, so he did not anticipate
All right.
being here this early.
Okay, well then, sorry, Christian. You can blame James. I was
prepared to.
I was willing to take you now,
Answer
but,
questions.
all right. No, we'll wait for the presentation. So next
Various concerns.
we have, so when he does show up, we can do it, just because I don't
Yep,
think
I'll
it'll
let
be
you know
that
when he's-
long. But let's move on now. Medfield State Hospital Development Committee to discuss the proposals for the Medfield State Hospital and the evaluation process. Todd, will you be? Yeah, please. And is there anybody we need to promote?
Yeah, I will,
I see some
I believe they're all
hospital-sounding names in the participants, the attendees.
here. Gus, you're the fourth. It's like, I know I'm missing something.
You want me to put my video on?
So I think, Nick, we would probably have Johnny Martinez,
Johnny's just been promoted, and Chris McMahon is joining as well.
okay, and I think we also have Eric Bush and Erica Schechter
Erica, yep.
from Peregrine, and possibly Mike Mitchell from
Sure.
Mass Development.
They're here if you want to call your meeting to order.
Okay, so this was posted as a meeting for the Development Committee, so I will call that to order at 8:16.
Then you should note, just for the record, who's participating remotely. It looks like Johnny is there,
Chris McMahon as well.
and
Right,
Chris
so the
McMahon as
committee is myself, Johnny Martinez, Chris McMahon, and Selectman Murby.
well.
And
Do they
then-
have to confirm their,
They should confirm they're participating
yeah,
remotely.
if Johnny and Chris could just turn your videos on or audio on to confirm that you're participating remotely, and that you're not actually here? Thank you.
You're not watching the Astros game?
Chris McMahon is here. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. All right, Todd.
right, thank you. Well, Scott, is a difficult act to follow, I know. I thought I would just begin by maybe doing an overview. I know Gus has kept you up to date over time, but I think it might be helpful to reset. We started the RFP process approximately a year ago. We took the fall and the spring to issue that document. We went through several rounds of public comment and several rounds of comment by the Selectmen, and the RFP was issued on April 5th of 2021. We then marketed that plan as required by the Memorandum of Agreement with Mass Historic and others. We also advertised in the Central Register, in the Medfield Press, and ran announcements on the town's social media. And ultimately, as best we could track it, over 165 recipients either received the RFP directly or downloaded it on the town's website. Our process prior to the proposal deadline provided for questions and answers from interested developers prior to submission, and we worked through several rounds of that, totaling 45 questions from a half dozen different interested groups. We hosted a site walk on May 24th. We had representatives from 11 groups attend, and ultimately, prior to the deadline on August 2nd, we received proposals from two development teams, one led by Trinity Financial and the other led by Pulte Homes. Pulte Homes actually had 3 variations in their proposal, so in effect, the committee was tasked with evaluating 4 different proposals. As I'm sure you know from reviewing the proposals, Trinity would preserve all of the buildings and rehabilitate them in accordance with federal and state historic standards, and Pulte, in all 3 scenarios, is proposing to demolish existing buildings and construct either 73 housing units in the Arboretum, or 602 or even 702 housing units on the entire site under their different options A, B, and C. So once we received these proposals, beginning on August 3rd, the day after the deadline, we began our review. We were assisted by Peregrine Group as part of the technical assistance made available by Mass Development. And we used an evaluation matrix that tracked the questions in the RFP that required responses from the developers. We did several rounds of formal questions and answers with each of the respondents, and we also did a formal interview with each development team, and those interviews were well attended. The Pulte call had 42 participants on it, and the Trinity call had 64 participants on it. In addition, we sought and obtained input and provided opportunity for questions from various stakeholders, including the Medfield Historic District Commission, the Medfield Historical Commission, the Massachusetts Historical Commission, the Medfield Energy Committee, and the Cultural Alliance of Medfield. We obtained clarification on various points from Town Council Attorney Sorrell, as well as our special counsel, Mead, Tallerman, and Costa, on points related to 30B requirements. And then we completed our evaluation as a committee during our September 29th meeting, so approximately 8 weeks from beginning of the review to the conclusion of the review. We compared notes and findings, and the basic conclusion was that Trinity Financial consistently received higher ratings from the committee across all 4 of our evaluation categories. The only one that was close was the development team category, where both groups rated very highly based on their extensive track record over many, many years. In addition, I think it's fair to say there's a high level of support for the Trinity proposal from all of the stakeholder groups, judging by the written comments they submitted to us, as well as comments made during the interviews. We had a total of 36 comments or questions submitted by members of the public through the town's website. Again, heavily weighted in support to the extent they expressed a position in favor of one or the other for the Trinity proposal. So essentially, as a committee, we consistently found that Trinity was proposing something that was more in tune with what we said we wanted in the approved RFP, and that was reinforced by public and stakeholder comments we received during the evaluation period. So, based on the discussion on our September 29th meeting, the committee supports moving forward with Trinity to begin the next stage of formal due diligence. We did not formally vote on that in deference to the Selectmen. We understood that you wanted a chance to have some input and discussion, which is hopefully what we can we can accomplish here tonight. You may recall the RFP provided originally for a best and final offer at this stage, which was something we added, which, Meade Tellerman ran by the state to ensure it was permissible, but that was done with the idea that we would probably receive multiple proposals that were very similar, and there would be value in doing a best and final now. Instead, what we received were two proposals that were very dissimilar. And our conclusion as a committee is that any best and final should be deferred, following the contemplated 4-month due diligence period in the RFP, and all of our concerns as a committee are more fully vetted. We did confirm with Meade Tellerman that that's permissible under 30B to not do best and final now, but it would require us to designate one of the developers, and we would say Trinity, as the most advantageous. And then that would also allow us to retain Pulte as a backup offer. We would not need to reject, and we're not proposing to reject Pulte's proposal at this time. The intent of that 4-month due diligence period is for the developer to sharpen its pencils and sharpen its proposal. They'll get access to the buildings, which they've not had to date. They'll have improved access to town officials, school department, police, fire, things that we did not encourage fully at the earlier stages where we weren't sure how many proposals, and we just did not want to inundate town departments with questions from potential developers. We'll also give the committee another 4 months to sharpen our pencils, and we would propose to use that time to work collaboratively with town departments and committees and the selectmen to dig deeper into the projected impacts on the town, the types of questions that we know would need to be answered at a town meeting related to the state hospital. Recalling the conversation when the zoning was voted on, the types of questions that people will have, that we assured them we would have answers before we came before them with any type of disposition vote. Concurrently, we're also investigating whether any demolition on the campus, such as the current arboretum structures, will adversely impact the availability of historic tax credits, either for the core campus or even for CAMP. We would also seek for further input and advice from the selectmen during this period about whether it's beneficial to convey the entire campus as part of the disposition or potentially retain certain areas, whether that's the green and the north field or even the arboretum, for sort of keep those out of the first phase or any phase of development. So procedurally, in order to move forward, we would need to make the preliminary designation of a developer as most advantageous. That developer would be committing to spend significant monies as part of the 4-month due diligence process. And we would need to enter into some type of site access agreement that would give them standing to do testing and investigation that they needed to do. And if that all goes well, we would negotiate best and final at the end of that 4-month period with better information. If it does not go well or issues arise or adverse information surfaces, we would be in a position to move on to another plan at that point. We're also contemplating the best way to engage members of the public during that due diligence period, make sure that we're sharing information and responding to concerns that people may have in the community or just simply requests for additional information about potential impact of any project at the hospital.
That it?
That's it, yeah.
Pete?
So, at this point, you're looking for some input from us as to how we'd like to, or things that we'd like to have considered?
I kind of conveyed to the committee that my sense of the two of you is that you wanted to be involved throughout the process. I don't know so much that the committee's coming to you with questions, is that this seemed to be a critical point. And this isn't the only critical point. The thought was to have the two of you involved in this. So just kind of where it's at, where it's tentative decision. If before we take a vote and made that choice formal, if there was anything that we needed to know about before doing that.
All right. So I'll Todd and I stood together at Medfield Day for a while, and we talked about this then, but I'll just sort of reiterate what I said then, which I guess the first thing that I would say is I'd be very curious to figure out a way that we could get the pulse of the town as to whether the town's interested in the money or the project that appears to be what we said we wanted through our planning process. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I've never been bothered by density so much as I have by the product that we get out of it. And so what's important to me is what our final product is, I guess I would put it that way. And I think that we have some opportunities maybe to tweak what we have gotten from Trinity. I think that in general, my take is that I think most people in town probably want the town to go forward with the Trinity financial proposal. But I think that there may be some people that would want the 44 million. But I think there's a way to maybe tweak the Trinity financial proposal, because they're proposing very low density in the Arboretum area. They're proposing to reuse the existing houses, which I don't think any of those existing houses are very remarkable or interesting. And I think that
I hope they're not watching, Pete. I hope the houses are not watching. They're neither remarkable nor interesting.
Well, the only one that's remarkable and interesting is the white one that's like the 1700s house, which is the post and beam one where the roof is falling in, unfortunately. So I think that one may be beyond salvaging, but I thought the brick buildings were beyond salvaging too, so I'm fascinated that Trinity Financials can make it work. But I think that the Arboretum area actually, to me, I wouldn't mind if it was denser than even the committee's proposal was, because I always thought they were kind of I don't think it'll affect the feel of the open space at that site if there is a cluster of denser development on that Arboretum area, is the way that I feel about it. And if there was a development that wasn't dissimilar than the Larkin development down the road, or the Old Village Square development on that Arboretum site, I don't think that people in town would find that objectionable. It would give you a little different visual feel of that area, but most people aren't going to be walking through the neighborhoods and the backyards of those houses, regardless of how many houses there are there. The area that interests me and that I would go to there is not to walk through the backyards of the people in the Arboretum or the front yards. And so I wouldn't mind if the town negotiated higher density with Trinity Financial in that area. So that's the second thing. The third thing is I'm not sure that it makes sense to me to turn over the North Field to Trinity Financial if nothing's going to happen with it. If it's just going to be left as a field, I think it might make sense for the town to hold on to that, and maybe in 50, 100 years, the town meeting might choose to rezone it and do something different with it. It just makes more sense to me that some of the open space would be left with the town. I may have the same thought process with the green out front, that maybe that should remain with the town as well. But
So it would be by designating them as most advantageous and initiating that 4-month due diligence period that would open up that negotiation. So they've made a proposal right now that is subject to certain assumptions, including getting access to the buildings to do formal third-party assessment. That could change their numbers. We told them as the committee, we noted that their purchase price was $2 million to the town and then $1 million donation to CAM, and we asked them if they would consider reallocating those dollars. We asked them if they would proceed with core campus, and then they said they would, excuse me, on the purchase price point, they said they would consider that. We asked them if we didn't award the Arboretum to them, but we awarded the core campus to them, whether they would continue with the core campus, and they said, I think maybe would be a fair way to put that, but they
You would have
didn't
a
say
high
no.
interest in what would happen in the Arboretum, certainly, but if we were asking them to do it in the Arboretum, they might be very interested
Or
in
you
doing
may
it.
simply decide, I mean, the town has the ability, we said we would convey, all, some, or none of the 87 acres. So we have the ability during this period to negotiate those points. We can't negotiate them now. I mean, they could go into those buildings and change their offer significantly to the point where it didn't make sense, for example, to pursue it, or they may improve it. So we can't really negotiate those points in a vacuum now without ensuring that they're staying at the table based on what they're finding in the buildings, and if they're doing if they're doing soils testing, whatever, they could do soils testing and decide they don't want to move forward at all.
Yep,
So none of the things you're talking about wanting to explore and negotiate are precluded by going into the due diligence phase. They're actually initiated the next phase of engagement with one group, which we're proposing as a committee would be Trinity, based on their response to the RFP that we published.
that's pretty much the thoughts that I had as I looked at the Trinity, or looked at the two proposals. But
Okay.
I personally like the Trinity proposal just because it keeps the buildings, which I happen to like.
If I could just comment on your other question earlier, I think as a committee, we're not all the way there. So I think it's very important to us to be able to present something at a potential town meeting regarding the hospital that we feel we could stand behind. And so the idea of kind of taking people's temperature now, where we haven't fully vetted, for example, the projections around, school costs, feels premature, and that people may be making assessments based on currently incomplete information.
Yep, understood, yep. It's a lot of material to digest, and I'm sure that not many people have had the opportunity to go through it in detail.
A lot of it is pictures, though, but it is a lot of it. Anything else, Pete?
No, that's it.
Yeah. So thank you, Todd, I appreciate it. And let me give you some thoughts first, and then I'll follow up with some questions. And I think, I think I had the same reaction that you all had, sort of the initial reaction as between the two, that, the Trinity is closer to what people are expecting. It's closer to what's already there. And the other proposal was really an option we didn't consider. It really was not something that was entertained by the Master Planning Committee seriously. It was not really something that was, it wasn't really on the table, right?
The trigger for the town's purchase in 2014 was to prevent a 450 unit development.
Right, that's what I'm saying. And I'm saying we didn't consider somebody offering us $44 million for the property, really. And we haven't really evaluated it. And so the thing that I'm struggling with is, since we really have a proposal that's not really vetted at all, in the sense from the town, and the thing that I have a hard time with, or a thing that I'd like to talk about, is I don't think you can evaluate these two proposals without evaluating the financial impact on the town between the two proposals, right? And I think you can't look at these two disparate ideas sort of without asking the question of, what would we do with the money, and what impact would that have on taxpayers, and what would you get out of it, right? Because in none of the scenarios did we really propose, what if you could have a $1,200 a year tax cut as part of it? Would you be willing to do X, Y, and Z, right? And if you crunch the numbers and you look at how the budget works and how the finances work, you can get in that neighborhood, right? From the Pulte proposal, from the numbers in the Pulte proposal. I will say that that's certainly not, my reaction to the two of them was more trying to go through the exercise of, making the best case for the proposal that certainly I didn't have the initial positive reaction to. But understanding that this is an asset of the town, different people in the town value it for different reasons. There's different concerns and objectives that people have. There's obviously always concerns about taxes and expenses and the rest of it. And so I struggle with the notion that you can make this judgment between the two without modeling out, even at the high level that we have now, what it would look like and what it would mean. And so that you're understanding from a taxpayer perspective, from a financial perspective, if we opt for the proposal that's going to have, certainly going to be best for preserving the buildings and the campus, right? And I think I said at the town meeting on this, that the zoning we adopted was certainly the best opportunity to preserve for people who value most the buildings and the layout of the campus over everything else is the best shot for it. And I think we have what looks like a viable proposal that preserves the buildings and the layout of the campus. The cost of that, and I think we knew this in the abstract, right? And I think we always knew, and Gus has talked about this in the past, about that the kind of proposal that would fetch the most money is something like this Pulte proposal, right? But if we're going to ask people to evaluate which ones they prefer, I don't think we can ask them to evaluate or give us input on it. And I agree with Pete that I would like some input, not just from the people who have the most interest in the buildings and the most interest in the campus, but from people generally in the town about what they think about it. I don't think you can do that without looking at the finances, right? I don't think you can look at that without saying, okay, here are our budgetary issues, here's how the money would come in, here's what we would propose to use it for, here's what that would mean from a tax perspective, here's what that would mean from a capital perspective. For all of those things, for all the benefits, recognizing that you'd be giving up something in that. Now, again, I don't know that it's worth giving it up, right? I mean, I don't think every, as you know from the discussions, I don't think every judgment comes down to, we're not running a business, right? So we're in the business of doing public goods and investing in public goods. And so I am perfectly open to the notion that you leave money on the table because there's a long-term public good in preservation. There's a long-term public good in the other proposal. So I am not, I don't have a position on it. But I have a hard time saying to people, you ought to pick between these two, sort of in the abstract without kind of doing a breakdown of this is where the money would go, this is how it would come in, this is what you would get, this is the impact you would have. This is how it would change the town. This is how it wouldn't change the town. And so that's where I'm, from a pure process standpoint, where I struggle a little bit with the idea that you can sort of pick now, even getting input from people on it as between the two. I think it's almost certainly the case that looking at it without that piece of it, right? Looking at it without that tax impact, financial impact piece of it, people are always going to prefer the fewer units. I mean, I've been at enough Affordable Housing Trust meetings, and pretty much all of them for the last 6 years, to know how it always comes down for the most part, right? And it's fairly predictable what the response is going to be. But I don't think you can kind of cut off that piece of it and say, well, we'll look at that later and then present to the town meeting one of the two without having really broken down the financial impact. The second piece of this, though, is that given the breakdown with the state, as I do my back of the envelope math, and I spend a lot of time looking at the town budget, I don't know that we should necessarily look that hard at that second proposal under the current breakdown with the state. And so one thing that I think we should put on the table is whether we would approach the state about altering the deal, altering the breakdown, because the state, at least the governor, and certain aspects of the state government, maybe not our contractual counterpart in the state, have a public policy interest in developing more housing. And so one of the two proposals develops more housing than the other, right? And again, this is not to say that I favor it one or the other, it's just to say that I think to make a little bit of the case for it, would we explore the possibility of going to the state and saying, look, if we went down this route, we need to change the breakdown. If we adopted this proposal, we'd like to revise and renegotiate the contract. And I don't know that you necessarily thought of that, but that's something that's been on my mind. Because again, this was something that when we negotiated that agreement, I don't know that we were necessarily thinking it was going to be these kinds of numbers as opposed to something else. And again, it may just be that it's a complete non-starter, but I would just want to make sure that as we're vetting the two of them, we kind of understand what the differences are. And to me, you just can't understand the contrast between the two of them without kind of doing the cost breakdown between the two. So those are my two thoughts. I promised you a question, but I don't really have one other than to say, well, what do you think of that?
Well, on the first one I agree, except I think it's done as part of this next 4 months. I think, we've asked formally Pulte for information behind their assumptions on, for example, school costs and impact on the town, and they basically restated, these are the numbers without any background. What we've gotten from Trinity is a study by Mark Fougere, who's done work I think you've seen probably as part of the Affordable Housing Trust, other projects, who's a credible person in the space. I'm not saying I accept or the committee accepts any or all of his numbers, but the idea would be then to drill down. I don't think you can say, any of these, I'll call them 4 proposals, right? The 2 proposals, but one of them has 3 options, are executable right now. I mean, so, the Medfield Historic District Commission, for example, has bylaws about demolition and construction activity in a historic district. This is in a historic district. So to sort of put it to the town to say, do you want a pile of money or do you want this, I think is a little, there's kind of more to it. Even just their proposal A in the Arboretum, it's not clear to us, and I haven't been able to see that the master planning committee actually did this level of research when they said you can take down those buildings in the Arboretum and do 24 townhouses, that you could actually do that without jeopardizing the tax credits for the core campus. So we've engaged a consultant, as you know, on behalf of the committee to talk to the National Park Service and Mass Historic to get feedback on that question. Pursuing or just looking at the numbers on Pulte option A may obscure the fact that it forecloses development opportunities on the core campus, which we see as the big challenge. So I'm not disagreeing with you on the level of analysis. I think I see it as the timing is different. We want the best information we can get, and we don't have it right now.
And I guess that's the problem that I have, right? It's like you can't, and I understand the dilemma, right? The developer can't give you a really detailed proposal without the additional due diligence.
Right.
In order to get into
Which is
that
expensive.
process, you've got to pick one of the two, right? And I guess and it may well, but again, that's what I'm saying, that this is a concern I have. I'm not wedded to this, right? I'm not in love with my own statements. I'm open to discussion. But that's my dilemma here, is saying if we go down that route with Trinity as the development, and it's obviously not on the agenda to vote on it tonight, so it's not a vote for this. It's not we're not going to vote on it tonight, but if we go down that route, when is the point at which we feel like we're able to balance those things, right? When is the point at which we have a discussion either from the Selectmen or the town administration or the warrant committee or what have you on sort of what you would use the money for, such that you can really lay out to people, this is what the differential impact would be. And I'm coming at this from the perspective, for me personally, as an individual, I'm perfectly fine with your recommendation. But I just want to make sure that, from in my public position, that we're comparing the 2 proposals kind of on the best merits of each, as opposed to saying we're going to look at the 2 that we have and sort of pick one without kind of looking at, because they're different, right? I think if your constituency is the buildings and the campus, it's clear that Trinity is better for the buildings and the campus. If you look at the town collectively, and again, given the concern about taxes and all of the other things that we have, and again, it may turn out that the Pulte proposals are negative from that front too, or not a sufficient positive, because it's sort of trading off on 2 things, right? It's trading off on a financial benefit versus a lot of what I think are very serious benefits in the preservation of the campus and all the rest of it. And so that's kind of my dilemma. Is that
Can I throw a comment
Yeah.
in reaction? And first off, like you, the fact that Pulte put in a proposal that basically put what I'll call a sheer monetary value on the maximum economic value you can extract from redevelopment there, I actually really appreciate it. Because we had no reference point. We didn't know what the opportunity cost is. We were giving up when we decide to go down the path of restoring the hospital. And that's as good a benchmark as any. Having said that, the town went through a 4-year master planning process, spent at least $500,000 to get to the picture of what the town said it wanted. And the context of what this committee's been asked to do is to take that and then pursue or explore what the possibilities were to actually develop in accordance with the master plan for the hospital. I'm not arguing with the idea that it might be useful for people to have the comparative between what's the best we could do if we got 20 million or 25 million out of the 40 million on a split. I have a hard time picturing the state knowing that it's a $40 million number, just agreeing to change it, but.
Yeah, they may not. They may not,
But my
right?
point is, whatever that number turns out to be, I can see how it's useful to do that. I'm not sure that this is the committee that should be asked to do that. This is the committee that's been asked to pursue the implementation of the master plan, and we have something there. If in fact we were to go like in the direction of Pulte, I suspect that that pulls the rug out from CAM and the restoration of the chapel because of the historic tax credits and everything. So basically, there are already implications of doing that. Now, at the point in time that the town has to decide whether, assuming that we get to an agreement, that Trinity does its due diligence and comes up with something, that something isn't going to look I would be astonished if that something looked exactly like the master plan. For one thing, right now, the proposal doesn't have any commercial property whatsoever. And
Not true.
well, the Trinity?
Mixed use is considered
Huh?
commercial, zoning is mixed. The property is zoned,
No,
artist residence, live, work,
There-
is commercial. Whether they call it commercial or
Well,
not, it's zoned mixed use.
I understand. But what I'm saying, Bill, is that as opposed to having office space somewhere, there's living, all the buildings are used for living.
And that's not true either. There's 300,000 square feet that's not being used for anything at the moment. I'm not
Okay, all right,
arguing-
well-
Listen, I'm not arguing
Yeah.
with anything that Todd said or anything that you guys are saying up there, but I was wish you had a microphone, but you said you weren't going to take comments.
Well, since you're already talking,
Right.
you can get a
That would
microphone,
be
and
nice.
we'll just consider that Bill is not a member of the public, so we're going to let him speak.
So let me just make just a couple of points. I'm sure that the committee, although I hate to speak for the committee, but I'm sure the committee was as surprised and perhaps disappointed as I was with the number of responses that came in. Because they went out to something in the neighborhood of 36 or 38 historic preservation companies and got one response back. And it went out to, I think, 4 or 5 at least of the major tear it down and build something else companies. For example, Pulte, Avalon Bay, I think, was one of the bidders. Avalon Bay did Danvers, the redevelopment of Danvers. It was, DCAM sold directly to Avalon Bay to do that. You didn't get any responses from any of those companies. As a citizen, I'd like to know if we found out any reasons why none of these people voted. Responded.
So can we put a pin in that, Bill?
Yes.
And then I want to just come back to the process, the process point here, and
Well-
then we can answer that question. But I'm going to cut it off. I did say we weren't going to take public comment at this point.
I'm sorry, I have
Oh.
to say this. The zoning vote was not an endorsement of the master plan. The zoning vote was,
Bill, we got it. We got it.
well, but I mean,
No, but we're having a discussion here, we're not making a decision. So before we're going to make a decision, you'll have an
Fine.
opportunity. And so I want to just get back to the process point, not so much on the details of the zoning, but, and let me, if I could just interrupt you here a little bit, because this is the second piece of my thought here, which is, so the one way to do it, which is kind of the stalking horse I outlined at the beginning, is to kind of come up with a town financial model of both of these proposals at the beginning, and kind of weigh those two models at the outset, right? And have as part of the initial assessment between the two, you're going to pick, right? You're going to pick this financial benefit that's going to have these impact on people in this numbers, or you're going to trade off at the beginning. The other way to do it, which I think is where Gus is kind of heading, and this is my question as the timing and the point at which you do it. And I will say that when I was thinking about this 6 weeks ago, I probably was more of the view I just described. The second way to do it is that you always have the stalking horse proposal, right? And this is something I think I've said a number of times. You kind of will always have the Pulte option, right? Even though we only got one of them, even though, and I think we kind of knew this just from the standpoint, if you were sort of in desperate straits as a town, like, they're kind of always going to be there, at least in the the way the demographics are in the Commonwealth for the next 5 to 10, 15 years. There could be a change after that. But in that realm, you're probably going to have that option. So the other way to do it is to say the time to develop the alternative financial model and the time to do this part of it is while you're having the discussion with Trinity, right? So in other words, if we were to go ahead with, and again, we're not going to vote this tonight because I do want to have some public comment before we do that. But the other way to do it is
There's no vote.
there's no vote on the agenda or anything, right?
I mean, there's no vote in the process for you guys. The committee is going to come up with a recommendation on who we should move ahead with. We'll either approve it or not. But at this point, Todd's not here to get a vote from the.
No, I know, that's not on the agenda either, but I would hope before you would we'd pick one of the two, that we would vote to pick one of the two. I mean, I would think. So based on the recommendation that you're making, I don't
Yeah, I mean, I think-
understand what the legal process is under the agreement, but.
I have to look.
Yeah, so, but anyway, we're not voting on that tonight, so the other way to do it is.
Let's not even worry about the legal for a minute here, unless Mark wants to weigh in. The committee's been asked to evaluate the proposals that have come in and develop, and if appropriate, pick one. The committee's kind of done that. If what you're saying is that as selectmen, you would like to actually make the decision, I don't think that's how this was set up at this point in the process. I think it was actually set up at the point that we were really going to go ahead with something. But I think I'm getting out in front of my skis here. But if Pete and Mike say no, we want to make, forget whether it's the legal, maybe the legal says you have to do it. But even if you don't, if they want to basically weigh in on the decision of who we designate, I'm not sure how you're going to do it unless you kind of override the entire evaluation that the committee's done, because the committee's already done it.
I'm not, again, and I want to get away from it. We got to technically find out under the RFP and everything else who has to decide it. It's usually the selectmen who have to sign the agreement to the extent of all the rest of it. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's delegated to the development committee. I don't want to talk about the legal, whatever the rule is, we'll follow the rule. I'm just thinking about conceptually in the process. So the second way to do it is to say, the Trinity proposal is obviously closer, right? Closer to what the zoning, the proposal, the discussion, the rest had in mind, right? It looks like it does now, right? I mean, that's kind of the thing, that's the focus has been on coming up with something that looks like it does now, right? That was the focus of the master planning committee. That was the focus of the whole process, is how do we preserve the buildings and make it look like it does now, right? And that's where we came up with, I think, a zoning proposal that gives us the best shot to get approval. And I agree with Bill entirely. The zoning endorsement was not an endorsement of the preferred scenario, the master plan, anything else. It was an endorsement of a set of zoning rules. That's what it was. And not that the master planning process is unimportant.
I mean, the committee agrees with that. I mean, that's not.
Consider it. I mean, it's important.
I mean,
It's
that's-
interesting. It's a lot of work.
that's settled.
They did a great job. Whatever. But just from thinking about it at this point, saying, because the other way to do it is to say, all right, we'll take your recommendation. Whoever formally votes to go down that process, we'll answer that question. And then in the alternative, we develop the financial model on the alternative proposal, right? Which may include approaching the state to see if there's any possibility of renegotiating, if they wanted to incentivize us. And I think Gus is likely correct, because what the Commonwealth generally does on housing is say we'd like to build more housing and put no money whatsoever behind it. And that's generally why we end up in a situation where the house prices keep going up, despite decades and generations of political leaders saying we need to have more housing, but they don't put any resources behind it. Lo and behold, you don't get more housing.
I think we have a good basis for going back to the state and asking them to rethink it. I mean, in Newton, they're basically giving the city of Newton the West Newton Armory for affordable housing, instead of selling it to them and taking half the proceeds.
Yeah, so that's kind of, thank you, Pete. That's kind of the second way to do it would be to say, we'll get some public input. We'll discuss it. Whoever proceeds will proceed on the Trinity, but then we'll develop sort of the stalking horse. And by the time if assuming the Trinity comes through as viable, you're presenting it to the town meeting. People have in the background, here's what the economic alternative would be, recognizing that there's obstacles, there's problems, there's difficulties, and all the rest of it. But it's a yes or a no on the Trinity proposal, and you kind of get the final yes or no on that, right? And
Yeah, so
then-
that's consistent with how we're thinking about it. It assumes, however, Trinity stays at the table. They don't get into the buildings and say,
Yeah, well,
time out,
if
we're
they
out.
leave, they
We're
leave.
just out. Right.
Right.
So,
The part I didn't understand about your comment there, Mike, at first, was that modeling of the Pulte option. I don't know what, like, first up, my first reaction is, given where this committee's going in trying to, approach a contract, I'm not sure it's reasonable to then say, but at the same time, we want to ask you to create a scenario that's entirely different and do the analysis. But on top of that, it's like, I'm not really sure what that analysis looks like. We know what Pulte's going to do. We know they're going to give us X amount of money. And so, yeah, there's some study around what the town cost impacts would be, but there's, like, either it's a really simple job or it's not a simple job, and this is probably not the committee that should do that. Maybe it's through the planning.
Yeah, no, I'm not suggesting you're the committee to do it.
Okay,
That's another
okay.
question, right? Again, I am not staking out a position
Okay,
here on this,
okay.
but I'm trying to understand
Yeah.
where in the process do we lay out for people, and maybe we don't, maybe we just say, look, we're gonna pick Trinity, this is what we're gonna do, we're not gonna give any information on the others, and we're just gonna go ahead with that, we're not gonna look at both.
so it was,
I think we have to have some sense, in the same way we did with the school, and looking at the cost of the two different options, and looking at the different proposals, and the different places, like, we have to have some sense, here's what this looks like. And we haven't done that, right? Because we really didn't, even in the modeling that Pat did, we really didn't have the model where we get $35 million for it, right? Like, that wasn't, we didn't come up with that in the process, which, given that a lot of our expenses, and maybe $2 million, $2.5 million of what we pay in our budget every year is a result of effectively undercapitalization, right? We're paying off the tax levy, things that are really capital expenses that should have been funded between 1965 and 2010 and weren't, right? That we're making up for, that we pay as we go. Those are the kinds of expenses that are amenable to being resolved through an infusion of cash, right? Now, again, I'm not saying that's what we should pick, because as I say, that we're not running a business, we're not picking the best financial option here. Only there's other public goods other than the minimization of taxes, right? As much as I don't like to pay taxes, nobody does, right? But I think we do have to have an understanding of what it is, and it may be that the way we develop that understanding is something that the town is going to do, right? I don't think we need to ask Pulte to do it. I don't think it's that complicated. I think it's a matter of kind of modeling out what the progress would be, what the timing of the payments would be, putting aside for a minute just all the complications of the rest of it, just to understand financially, this is sort of the alternative that would be there, because to Bill's point, otherwise we only got one proposal that fits the Trinity model, right? We've only got one. And there could be any number of reasons for that. It could just be COVID, it could be...
I mean, I know, I mean, I've talked to 4 or 5 groups that chose not to bid, so I have some insight into that.
And what is that insight?
Well, one group said, we see this as, 2/3 preservation, 1/3 new construction. It doesn't really fit our model. We love the site. We've done other state hospitals. This is Evelyn Bay. We don't think we want to do another state hospital where it's mostly historic rehabilitation. We had other groups say, we are expert in historic tax credits. We generally pair them with low-income housing tax credits, affordable housing. We think that would involve a proposal that generates a lot more affordable housing than what you said you wanted in the RFP. We don't think we have a competitive advantage. We pass. And we've had others say, you guys are asking for a lot. This isn't pay us $1 for the FAF Center and do something with it. This is, here are some guidelines, here are some expectations, and as you read the RFP, you can see, because I think it reflects views in the community, it's a dynamic situation. There are different constituencies in town that favor different things for that property, and that ends up getting reflected in the RFP saying, here we want something that respects the 5 years of master planning, but it doesn't have to be the master plan, right? Which is why when we interviewed Pulte, the first thing they said was, we respect everything that was done. We saw in the RFP we could submit something that wasn't in that vein, and so we did. And we had an hour-and-a-half discussion about it. So, the fact that people didn't respond, I think, there are reasons for that, but it doesn't matter. I mean, unless we're going to say we're going to rip up the RFP and start over, and we're going to get more responses, in another round, which I don't necessarily think is realistic or likely, I'm trying to work with what we have.
It's nice to know that. That's good information.
Yeah, all right.
So Todd, just to follow up on your question, Mike, Mike was asking the question, so where would something like that fit in the process? And so just, let's assume that whatever that modeling is, that's the max economic return modeling, gets done outside of the development committee, inside the town, and it's not heavy, deep modeling, it's, bigger than a bread box, smaller than a barn kind of modeling. In the process, the results of that modeling would be important if Trinity were to get through the due diligence period, and by the end of the due diligence period said no bid. Then we probably want to have that information that might be useful information to have if we literally had Trinity walk. If we had everything went forward with Trinity, we worked out the pre-town meeting agreement, and for whatever reason the town voted it down, that might be another time. I'm just trying to figure out from a timing standpoint, when would that kind of information be useful? It seems like it's those two times.
Well, I mean, I think our view is there's a very high bar to try to go to a special town meeting and advocate for something. And so it's during that 4 months, or maybe it turns
Right.
out to be more than 4 months,
Right.
when you've got other activity going on at the property, and you're applying the same judgments to Trinity's assumptions. I don't know that the school department agrees with their assumptions about the impact on the schools. And we said we would sit down and meet with them once we designated somebody, not ask them to evaluate 4 proposals. So now we could, right? It's kind of to your point. We could ask them to evaluate that. But, I think you can't really assume that each of the proposals submitted on August 2nd is actually executable and people will stand by that proposal, not change the terms, not decide they're not interested for whatever reason. So the benefit of starting the due diligence with the one whose evaluation was most favorable by the real estate people you put on your committee is to start that clock and see if they'll improve the price. We've asked for that. See if there's some optionality around the Arboretum, that right now they're doing 5 units historic renovation. They're not doing 24, they're not doing 87 or whatever the number was in Pulte version A. So I don't know what it costs us to get this information. We're gonna probably a little bit of legal time to write an agreement that gives them access to the site and some type of standing. And then just, roll up the sleeves and work on the next phase of improving the information.
The other gear in the clock that we should just be mindful of, it's not the main gear in the clock, but the chapel infirmary CAM effort is a gear in the clock. And so if we went down the non-preservation route, I think we will effectively pull the rug out from that whole effort. If we appear to be seriously, it's one thing to look at something as a scenario. If we, and Gene Minio would have to confirm this, but if we appeared to be looking seriously in the direction of that because of the potential jeopardy to tax credits, I think that will affect Gene's ability to fundraise for CAM, because the people that she's basically trying to bring the CAM process in line with the redevelopment process, and actually go ahead and join. Trinity's offered to be the construction manager, and she said that makes great sense. So it's not the main gear in the clock, it's a gear in the clock. And so I would just caution that we want to be thoughtful. That we understand we could potentially do something if we're not thoughtful about how we do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that any proposal and any other constituency that has an interest in one of the proposals is always at risk that it won't pass for whatever reason, right? And there's always going to be a risk. There's always going to be an impact on that. But my hesitation, again, is not hesitation. My question's still open, is that we do have to at least provide that information to understand what it is. We have kind of a clear sense of what it would mean, because it's an abstract, you sort of have abstract big numbers, right? And you can have with big sounding numbers, a certain matter of innumeracy sets in, right? Where you have a big number and it's like, that sounds big. It's like when you see in the paper, you read about the number of breakthrough infections you had. Well, we had so many breakthrough infections, right? Well, it's entirely meaningless without telling you how many people are vaccinated, what percentage is it going to be, how many people were sick. You know, I mean, there's all sorts of other context you need to actually understand what it means. And that's what I'm kind of getting at, is sort of the context for the alternative and what it would mean. And so it sounds, you answered my question that the development committee hasn't done it, doesn't want to do it. And I don't even know if it has to be in the context of Pulte in particular, but sort of that type of proposal, recognizing I think that type of proposal is kind of mostly going to be available, right? It's mostly going to be,
Presumably.
yeah, I mean, it's less complicated, would you agree, from a real estate perspective, and some, putting aside the historic issues and all the rest of it, than the tax credits and all this other stuff, right? There's fewer moving parts. So you basically tear it down and you build the same houses you build in a lot of other locations.
In Walpole
right?
and in
Right, which is not
Westwood.
necessarily what anybody really wants in the abstract. I just want to make sure that we're not going about it in a way that when we come to the end of it, we'll say, what would that have meant, right? What would the financial alternative have meant? And you can actually understand, you know what, it sounded like a lot of money when you actually crunch it down. You know, it wouldn't have made that big of a difference because here's all these other expenses you'd have to carry, right? You'd have to carry these additional expenses, and you can even list off what some of them would be, and that weakens or that limits the benefit of kind of
Right.
taking some of those
Well-
capital costs that we spend on our tax levy every year as a result of underfunding in the past, and shifts it to something else, right? So that's,
Right, and you know, there are questions about where you end the analysis, right? So option C, 700 units. So how many people are living up there? 1,400? That's more than 10% of the population of Medfield currently. What does that do to, a lot of those are homes, not rentals. So what does that do to the market in town? What does it do to your school? We were talking about the school earlier. So how many school-age kids? I mean, Pulte has not engaged at that level of,
although I think we've done
dialogue.
more, I think we've done more work on that piece of it than we have on the town budget piece of it. Like, I think we've done, in the course of the hospital master planning analysis, we've done a lot in different housing. We've done a lot of analysis of, you build X number of houses of this variety, this is what we estimate these other impacts. That part of the modeling, I feel that we're further along than we are on the town budget and tax modeling. And that's the, again, as I say, it's not a position so much as a question, a hesitation, a concern. And, you know, I just sort of leave you with that. That's kind of where.
Just to confirm one thing, Mike put words in your mouth that I think kind of came out of my mouth. I basically commented in a manner that I kind of sounded like I was saying, don't burden the development committee with having to do this other second scenario modeling. But I think that was something but before we leave that, I assume that you would, I don't know whether, is that reasonable that the development committee would like to stay focused on the development path we're on?
well, I mean, I think we understand it's related. So, I mean,
Okay.
we'd be expecting to, you know, engage with warrant committee, for example. Nick's done some analysis already.
I guess what I'm
So-
asking is, should the development committee take the lead on the development of that second scenario?
I don't
was
think
suggesting
so.
no. I was suggesting no.
I don't think so either.
I was the one who said that, and then you said he said that.
Yeah, I just don't think we're
Okay.
in a position to understand all of those
That's-
nuances.
Okay, I just didn't want to speak for you, that's all.
So, I mean, again, the proposal would be to move forward with Trinity as the most advantageous, to pursue due diligence with them, but to put Pulte on standby, not to reject it, not to tell them we're not interested, to tell them we're focusing on this for the next 4 months, and to conduct additional analysis with town departments and committees, so that by the end of that 4 months, there could be a negotiation with Trinity if they, you know, assuming we're all still at the table, to try to get the best result for the town. And if we, you know, if there was a lot of support for that proposal, then potentially go to special town meeting or town meeting at that point.
And it sounded earlier, Pete, like you would like to get some more public input before we take that step. Is that a fair assessment of where you
Well,
are?
I think it'd be wonderful if we can get some input somehow from the residents, but,
Which step are you referring to now?
Before we designated one of them for the 4-month due diligence period, is that correct?
well, whenever, before the ultimate decision is made, I guess.
Well, the ultimate decision is go into town meeting and have the
Yeah, well, that's, no, before then, the sooner the better that you can get
I
the
mean-
residents. But the only way that I can think of to get that is these two opportunities that we have to take votes.
So,
And apparently those aren't available,
Yeah, let me
so-
slow this down a little bit, because if you're saying before we make the decision on which to proceed with, there's a couple things to keep in mind. We've gone through an evaluation of two proposals. One of the proposals, to be able to simply decide who, if any, we would move ahead with allowing them to do due diligence. We're at that point as far as the development committee. If you're saying before the development committee decides that, then the due diligence probably won't start till the beginning of next year. If you're saying before, we should know that before we bring something up to the town meeting, that kind of makes sense, but
I'm saying it would be ideal to get resident input, but and my thought was that we have these two elections at a special town meeting and a ballot, and so I was trying to
but that'll be
pony
next spring.
to piggyback on those, but those aren't available to us, so that, maybe you can't do it.
So, I mean, Nick has assembled all the public comments, and I don't know if you've seen those. I mean, there were a couple of rounds of comments on the RFP itself, then there were comments on the proposals. We solicited questions, people submitted questions, which were very helpful in general. So I understand that's not 100% participation by
Yeah.
residents of the town,
Yeah.
but there have been opportunities for input that
Yeah.
we've taken very
And
seriously.
I remember you told me that they're generally in favor of Trinity.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
But I guess the question though is from the standpoint of like a plebiscite of some kind, whether there's enough information, because there's other due diligence that has to be done. I do think before we're going to do that, we do have to have some of this financial modeling done on both of them.
Before we do what?
If we were going to take Pete's approach to try to just either, we can't use it at the election or the town meeting, but sort of a broad plebiscite as opposed to an opportunity for public input at one of our meetings. That's kind of the question that I would have, is that I do think, it sounds like there's a lot more work to be done on the Trinity.
Yeah, I mean, you
proposal.
formed a committee, we were 3 years at this, so, if you just want to put the proposals out there to see, thumbs up or thumbs down, I don't really know what we've been doing for the past 3 years, at this point, we're not standing behind one of them saying we want to go to town meeting with this one. We're saying, based on the RFP we published, which was vetted here and issued, by the town, the proposal that's most responsive and most highly advantageous in our judgment as a committee is the Trinity proposal, and we want to go to the next step with them to determine if we can get to a best and final that would be acceptable and attractive to the town.
I think Mark might have had something.
There is a mechanism to put a non-binding question on a town election ballot.
Right. But the ballots are already printed
Ballots
for the next
printed.
election, so it would be March, so
Ballots
it's,
No, I don't mean for the,
yeah, but that's too late
No, for
for
the
this
annual
process.
election.
For March,
No,
it's
no,
too late.
yeah.
No. I think, look, we didn't put a vote on this on the agenda, so we're not voting on this tonight. We need to answer the question of who even votes on it, and maybe we've given you the authority to do this without us weighing in one way or the other. I don't know. But we can certainly put it, on an agenda for a meeting in November and take whatever public input we're going to get, on the two of them. We won't be able to do the detailed financial modeling. I think it'll be at a level of generality. But I have no objection to that, Pete.
Could I try putting some words in your two mouths, maybe on this one?
I love it when you do that, Gus, so please do.
I try not to. So the development committee has gone through an evaluative process, looked at the 2/4 proposals. The entire committee actually was surprisingly consistent about rating, again, given the criteria that was driven off the master plan, was the evaluation on that criteria that we announced in the RFP. The committee was uniformly rating Trinity higher. So the committee itself has at this point informally reached a consensus that Trinity is the developer to move forward into due diligence with. That's where the committee's at. What I think I hear one or two of you saying is, well, we would like more time to, not a lot of more time, out till November, to first find out whether legally the selectmen have to vote to endorse that recommendation. Or even if that's not true, we'd like another meeting to be able to mull this over and provide feedback to the development committee on whether you're okay with the development committee proceeding with allowing Trinity to due diligence. So whether it's a legal vote or it's just the sentiment of the feedback from the selectmen, it sounds like you want one more meeting to be able to do that, between now and the 5th of November, to be able to mull that over and then either give the development committee go-ahead to make the decision or vote the decision or stop the process to do some other sort of thing to ask people what they want.
At this point, I think it's fine to have the development committee give Trinity the go-ahead to do the due diligence. So, ideally, it would be good to hear from residents in some very broad way what their pleasure is on it, because they are very different proposals. I mean, do you want the money or do you want the?
It'll go on a future agenda, and I'll definitely take public input at that. But I guess the other third side of this, or the third way to look at it, right, is that given the disparate nature of the proposals, I think they each have a different set of complications, right?
I think that's fair.
And so I think the complications on the Trinity side are more of a real estate, construction, finance set of complications, right? I think the Trinity proposal would require a lot more of the kind of due diligence within the expertise of the development committee. It's certainly more complicated on that side of it, we might call the development side of it, right? The other Pulte proposal is more complicated on a public side, on a regulatory side, right? You've got the Historic District Commission, you've got whatever additional impacts you would have by the additional units on water and sewer and roads and all. There's a whole set of complications. I'm not sure it's super complicated from a real estate development standpoint, right? In the same way that the Trinity was, Trinity's got all these moving parts for financing. I don't think you have those kind of moving parts on the Pulte side. And so even if you ultimately came to the end of that process and concluded that we weren't going to go ahead with Trinity, it might make sense to go ahead with Trinity anyway, even if we were favoring the other one, because it's going to take a lot more work to get that one kind of teed up to a genuine decision point. Because what I'm hearing from you as well, from the analysis you've done, we're not really at a decision point because there's so much more due diligence that has to be done, right?
Including by the committee, yes.
Including by the committee and so to kind of set this moment up as a sort of door A or door B, it's not really door A or door B, and I'm not as good at folksy analogies as Gus is, but we're really kind of further down the hallway, right? We've got to get the light and get us down the dark tunnel before we can get to an A or a B. And it may be that even if the ultimate conclusion is something else, that we've got to go down that Trinity path just to get to the doorway to be able to make a realistic choice. Is that a reasonable way to think about it? You can put aside the tunnel and the doors and the lantern, just saying that.
Picturing a gladiator emerging into the Coliseum and counting the lions.
Picturing more of the Mines of Moria.
I mean, so, go back to the special town meeting on the zoning. I mean, I remember, and I'm sure everyone on the committee does as well, people standing up and saying, I'm concerned about traffic. What is this going to mean for traffic? I'm concerned about schools. And so the only way you get to that in the real estate business is you pick somebody who made a bid that's subject to conditions, and you say, okay, let's, prove out these conditions and make a best and final offer that you're willing to close on. Okay. And I think what's a little different in this case, for the town as a seller of real estate as opposed to a private seller, is we have all these municipal activities and analyses that have to be done. Right. But, let's say Trinity goes out there and decides, okay, several of these buildings are beyond salvaging. Now we're going to do 200 units. I mean, all your numbers are changing. So it's doing it all now off of the initial proposals is not, and we don't have a confidence level that that's right. What we would be getting from them in the end, from either developer.
Right. No, I understand that.
So getting the information at what feels like a very low cost or arguably no cost to the town seems like a way to advance the discussion and the analysis so that we're all a lot smarter 4 months from now without having, gone to a point of no return or spent a lot of money that, we can't get back.
Okay. All right, well, I think we'll call it there, unless you have anything else, Todd or Gus. And we'll put this on an agenda for November. We'll decide who actually has to vote, or we'll do whatever the thing is we have to do to go this next step, and people will have an opportunity to come and comment on it at that point. But Todd, I appreciate the discussion very much. Thank
Yeah,
you
no, thank you. I know
for
it's
coming in. I think James Goldstein has appeared, so if we could kick out the hospital people and welcome the James Goldstein. And Christian, I tried to get you in before that discussion. All I can say is
I appreciate that.
so, and this one shouldn't be as long, I hope. So this next item on the agenda is a request. The Bay Colony Rail Trail Association is here to discuss the Medfield Rail Trail and request that we sign and approve a contract with our Zoppo for rail and tie removal and disposal. Oh, you kicked me out, and now you want me, oh, maybe I'll just stay out, and I'll come back. All right. Welcome, James Goldstein. Welcome, Christian Donner. I assume James is going to be doing the talking?
Yes.
All right, James, talk away.
Initially, yes, thank you. And I know you've already had a long meeting, and there are other things to come, and a baseball game. So I'll be as quick as possible and leave a lot of time if you need it for questions. Thanks for considering this. This relates to the invitation for bid process. There should be a set of slides that Nick Milano had, and I don't know if they've been teed up, but if they could be, that would be helpful. Thank you. So the next slide. This is the invitation for bid process. The IFB was issued in early September. We had a pre-bid conference and trail walk. Proposals were due October 1. 3 bids were submitted. The low bidder by far was our Zoppo Corp. At $80,000. Nick Milano called references and sent out a form for references as well. And I actually called one of the current references and reported back to Nick. And they were all strong and positive, and Nick can certainly weigh in at any point if he has more to say. But I would ask for the next slide if there's nothing more on the bid process.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So the next step in this process, actually, you missed one, Nick, number 3. Thank you. The proposed contract with our Zoppo, just to be clear on some key provisions, we wanted them to start and finish quickly, mostly because one of the $100,000 grants expires at the end of the year. So that's in the IFB and it's referenced in the contract. And as far as we know, there's no problem with that provision. There are various safeguards for the town in the IFB, and it's referenced. And when the contract is signed, you'll have a 50% payment bond, 100% performance bond, and indemnification of the town, which I think covers it well. And this, they have and have provided already copies, or at least attestation that they have the insurance coverages, and they may have even provided the documentation already. I'll continue unless someone else wants to ask or add something. Okay. So the next steps in the rail trail process, once the rails and ties are removed, the actual surface will be laid down, and it's 2 steps. There's a gravel/recycled asphalt subsurface, that's about a 6-inch surface, and the DPW, as I think you know, is providing the material and doing the work. And similar to what the DPW staff did for their clearing of the rail corridor, they're going to do this off hours, if you will, not during their normal duties. And I believe we are reimbursing them time and a half for that. And that will happen late winter, winter and then early spring. They won't finish it before the end of the year, but they will do as much as they can until there's a snowfall or the ground freezes. And I've had lengthy conversations with both Maurice Goulet and Bobby Kennedy about this process, and they're, ready to go once the rails and ties are removed. And again, they're going to be a little slower because it's off hours, if you will. But that's okay. As long as it's completed in the early spring, I think we're fine. After that is the final surface installation, and that's a stone dust surface, and that's 3-inch depth, and that's going to be contracted out. We have informal quotes on that, but not a formal quote yet. But we do have actual quotes on this stone dust material, and I'll get to that in a moment. And the final step is installing safety fencing, and that's designated on the plans. I'm not going to go into it now, but there are a number of places where the slopes are such that it's wise to have safety fencing, and we have specs for that. And again, that would be done by the contractor in the spring. That one could take a little bit longer, but we think it'll be done in the spring. The other amenities, things like benches, kiosks, and so forth, those are not happening within the first half of 2022 unless we have more savings than we anticipate, and we have funds for those. As you recall, those have always been outside of the core budget, but we do plan to continue fundraising, and these are small items. These are a few $1,000s, but at the moment, we're not planning to do those in the very near term. So I will continue unless there are other comments or questions.
I did have one question, I guess. Just, I'm trying to picture, the rails and the ties will be taken up before the start of the winter.
Yes.
The trail itself will therefore be clear in terms of, brush, branches, and all that stuff. None of the actual surface work will occur until late winter or early spring. I'm assuming there's no my guess is that if it snows this winter and we have a 1 1/3 mile open trail through the woods, people, cross-country skiers, who knows, will be using it. And I'm assuming there's no reason why that would be a bad thing for people to do in the winter before we've put the surface down?
I believe that's correct. I will say that there's one very small area, a few feet, literally, on the trail near the beaver dam, if you know where I'm talking about, that needs a little bit of fill first. And the DPW is committed to doing that before the snowfall, in other words, immediately as the first step. But other than that, because that is if you will, almost a hole along the trail, which could be a danger for someone. But once, and that exists now. But once that's filled, I don't think there's any issue.
Okay.
So to update you on the budget, and this is kind of the bottom line. If you recall, the total budget that we already have in hand is $274,000. $200,000 is from the Mass Trails grants, $74,000 we've raised privately. So I'm not going to go over all of these items, but you'll see that these are the key budget items. And there's an original budget, which was in our original plan, and then there's the actual for some items and updated estimates for others. I just want to point out a few quick things here. We've had some savings in these smaller expenditures up front. The DPW cleared the trees and vegetation. It actually cost more than we anticipated by almost $5,500. But the big increase was on the removal of the rails and ties. This bid is considerably more than we estimated. And the reason for that, and this was clear from all three bids, is the tie disposal costs are much more than anticipated. These have to be manifested or well documented as they're disposed. And I believe this contractor takes them to Maine, so there's a heavy trucking cost as well, and then they have to be disposed of properly. So that's a big additional cost. So we don't want to hide that. We want to be upfront about it, but we also have some significant savings, which I'll point out in a moment. The first one is on the gravel and recycled asphalt. DPW has very large quantities of this. we need over, what's the number? I think it's over 800 tons of it. Hold on, I'll tell you that. Yeah, 820 tons of it. And they have that much, multiple of that much. And they're going to provide that. It will require some of their existing materials to be mixed, and we will cover that labor cost. So we have a savings of around $37,500 right there. The installation of the surface, DPW is also doing that. Now, we do not have a firm number from DPW on this. I talked at length with Bobby Kennedy, who, as you know, it's his crews who will do this work. A little bit less conversation with Maurice Goulet on this, but this is the best guesstimate at the moment. And it's consistent with what we had in the original budget, less the gravel cost, if you follow me. So then we have the stone dust. The purchase cost has not changed. We've gotten recent quotes as recent as last week. The installation is less expensive, and we have, again, not formal quotes because it hasn't gone out to bid, but we have informal quotes from trail development companies who did the Holliston Trail and others, and it actually comes out to about $13,000 for the installation. It's only 2 to 3 days of work on the stone dust. All they do is truck it in, use a paving machine, and roll it. And they can do quite a bit in a day. So we rounded up to 15,000. And there's the safety fencing, which we've left the same from the original budget. The construction administration, we do have a quote for, and it's less than what we anticipated. And then there's road crossings and trail signage, which I think will actually be less than this, but we haven't changed that budget, 10,000. So our total has gone down slightly. It's at 262. We have, as I mentioned, 274 in hand, and we're still going to do some fundraising. So we feel confident that this project can be completed well within this budget. And I'll stop there and open it up for questions, if that's okay.
Pete?
So, James, my question had to do with the bid for Zoppo. I was concerned for you because of the fact that they valued the rails, the metal on the rails, so much higher than the other two. Are they locked in for their 80,000 bid so that even if the rails are worth less, you're still going to get it done for 80,000?
Well, once the contract is signed, I believe that's their risk, yes.
Okay, that was my concern.
That's their estimate of the value.
All right.
But, I mean, you folks deal with contracts all the time, but if someone overestimates or underestimates, it's their risk generally, unless there's a change in scope. But the value of the steel is not a change in scope, as, you know.
And you're requiring a performance bond to boot, so.
So that the 80,000 is the bottom line contract price, and they're taking the risk of the value of the steel then?
Yeah, steel's sky high right now, so.
Okay.
Yeah, it has increased a lot. I also noticed how much higher their value of the steel was than the others, but again, it's their risk, not ours, not the town's.
That's all I want to know. Thank you.
Okay.
Gus?
And my question also has to do with the Zoppo bid. As you mentioned, and I'm not trying to get that number to go higher than it already is, but sometimes when you get bids that are like really way out of line with other bids, even though it looks good, it's really evidence that the bidder that's the most attractive bidder doesn't actually know what they're doing. In this case, I'm looking, combining the bottom line costs, I don't care how they distribute it out, bottom line cost and the time they say it's going to take. And I note that while, you know, their cost is substantially below either of the other ones, in the case of one of them, their time is half of what they projected. So my question is, are you all comfortable, perhaps with the references, you have grounds to be more comfortable, that they in fact maybe just really did know more about how straightforward it was, and the other two just missed the target?
Are you asking Nicholas or me or both?
Anybody that wants to come. Really what I'm asking is, are you confident they're going to get the job done properly in the time frame and for the cost that we have here?
James, your conversation with their work up on the North Shore might be more applicable in this case.
Sure. I'm happy to mention that. In coordination with Nick, I called one of the references, which is working on a 5-town rail trail on the North Shore. It's called the Northern something Trail. I've forgotten the full name, but in any case, they were very, very complimentary and said in that case they are, and this is a multi-million-dollar project, they were, I think it was several months ahead of schedule on that particular project, but it was much more than what we are doing here. They were doing road crossings, they were doing pocket parks along this long trail and so forth. So it was a large project, but they were very pleased, and it did include rail and tie removal.
Okay, thanks. Great.
Those covered my questions, so you're looking for us to vote to approve this contract?
Yes.
All right. You have a motion,
Okay, I
Gus?
move that we approve the contract with R. Zappo for rail and tie removal and disposal.
Second.
Of $80,000.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? All right. Anything else, Christian or James?
No, but thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
both. Thank you both very much. All right, we'll go next to, if they're still out there in Zoom world, I see Bob Winograd. So we'll go next to the Community Choice Aggregation Committee, the CCAC, recommending the selection of an energy broker, an EB, for community choice aggregation and request BOS approval. Who is going to speak to this?
Bob will take over.
All right. Welcome, Bob, from Zoom.
Thank you.
And thank you for your
Great
patience.
introduction. By the way, what does the last C represent? You mentioned CCAC.
The Community Choice Aggregation Committee.
Committee. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Well, this committee consists of three of us, Megan Sullivan, Nick, of course, and myself. There are 2 open positions that happen to be filled. So it's going to be three of us who've been carrying a little over the course of the last 3 months. All of you, the 3 of you, have the memorandum with our recommendation. I'm assuming that you've read it. And I can summarize it if you'd like, and I'll try to do it in less than 3 minutes.
If you want to just give a couple of minutes for the viewers at home who are still with us and maybe didn't read the memo, but I did read it, but go ahead, please.
Okay. Back in July, we put out an RFP for a broker and consultant to provide services to broker electricity, find providers for electricity, and one that would be best suited for the needs that we're going to be putting together and representing at the time of Medfield. From that RFP, in the beginning of August, we had 3 responses. They were from Colonial Power Group, Good Energy, and Mass Power Choice. These are 3 consultant broker groups that have a long history in the state of Massachusetts. They're well vetted by a lot of the services they provided to other cities and towns. They're excellent in and of themselves. Any one of these would serve our purposes, our needs with it, and all of us felt that way. There are a couple of things that were differentiators. The first is our interest in community outreach and education. Critical to our success with this program is going to be how we present to the community the value of this community choice aggregation program. Since that is so critical, it was very important to see how each of these firms presented themselves. And given that we had beyond the RFP an interviewing session 1 hour long with each of these 3 firms, and then some follow-on questions that followed suit from those interviews. The Good Energy and Mass Power Choice were the 2 that stood out with regard to with regard to outreach and education programs. The services that they provide, the examples they provided us, the materials they provided us, as examples were outstanding. That was number 1. Number 2, it is the competitive bidding process. And it's in this context that Good Energy has a unique relationship with a nonprofit group that's called Green Energy Consumers Alliance. And it's an exclusive partnership with Green Energy. Green Energy Consumers, I said Green Energy, Good Energy, excuse me, mistake there. With regard to Green Energy Consumers Alliance, I have to get my words correct here. That is a local nonprofit group that develops renewable power sources in New England and then sells that power in competition with other providers of energy. This unique relationship that Good Energy provides is what two of the three of us in the committee felt would be very valuable for us to be able to take advantage of. Not that we would have any preconceived notion that we should be going with a contract with Green Energy Consumers Alliance, but just the reality that the option is there for us. And there are a number of cities and towns, I mentioned a few of them: Melrose, Gloucester, Milton, Waltham, Stone, Bedford, Rockland, Hamilton. Those are a few organizations, a few cities and towns that have had bids from Green Energy Consumers Alliance that have been competitive and met the definition of power sources that those communities have represented, and therefore it shows the Green Energy Consumers Alliance. There's no expectation here that we would go there. Just the fact that that opportunity would be out for us to be able to get a bid from them is something that weighed heavily with the two of us. So, two of us voted for Good Energy in that context. One of us voted for Mass Power Choice strictly on the community outreach and education program that he felt was truly superior to any of the three that we received. The two of us felt that community outreach and education, of course, is critical, but is extremely important. We, from the materials we have and from the conversations we have, we believe there'll be that Good Energy will serve us well, and the competitive bidding option is what swayed us. So it was a 2-to-1 vote. We're recommending Good Energy, and I'm open up for any questions that you may have about this recommendation.
Pete?
I've got no questions. I just got appreciation for the you folks going through this process and providing a recommendation to us. Thank you.
Gus?
Couple things. The first off, whoever wrote the summary of your evaluation, my compliments. I thought it was well written. It was organized, and it was just clear somebody put some good effort into it, and at least one of us who didn't know exactly what you had done really appreciated the explanation. So whoever that was, my compliments on that. I had two questions. One, I was trying to understand this Green Energy Consumers Alliance, the recs that they had. That was, at least two of you thought that was an advantage. It wasn't clear to me what the advantage, not that it's a disadvantage, and I know you're not committed to it, so that's all fine, but I wasn't exactly clear on what the advantage was.
Well, the advantage is that we have an opportunity to get a quote from another provider, as being Green Energy Consumers.
Okay, so it's just
okay. And it's not going to be available through Mass Power Choice.
So can I take from that then that the likelihood of going with Good Energy, their ability to get attractive rates is as good as, I think it was Mass Power was the one that said they had like a massive supply base. I'm just using basic economics here. Usually when there's a bigger source that you can draw from, the prices are lower. It sounds like that's not a factor here. Is that fair?
Well, we felt that is a factor from the standpoint that there are clearly cities and towns that have taken advantage of their offers. And if others have felt that there's been an advantage to go through that group, then there could be the possibility that we've had a similar experience.
If I could explain it maybe a little differently. So what any broker will do will go out to the whole market.
Okay.
They'll get bids from everybody that's supplying electricity at that point in time.
Okay.
What Good Energy has the ability to do is then to say, hey, Green Energy Consumers Alliance, we're out in the market now. Do you have any recs available that we can go grab? They'll quote a price.
Okay.
That's the difference.
That's the only difference. Okay. Okay, got it. Those are my questions.
Yeah, I think Gus asked the questions I was going to ask about. I did have a little bit of a hard time understanding what the real difference was between the two. And so it sounds like we're we have good options here, and that, not that it's a coin flip, but that whatever advantage there is a relatively modest one, and we're not really limiting ourselves by picking one or the other. Is that fair? Just if we picked Mass Power, we couldn't go with the GCEC, whatever that is.
We felt all three would do a great job. We just felt that the two were so close together that it was really splitting hairs as to which to go with.
Yeah, okay. I don't have any other questions, comments. Mark, Christine, anybody? Do we want to make a motion, Gus?
You have to sign, all of us sign this one, I think?
You're all signing.
Yeah.
We'll bring the contract back. We just still have to negotiate. It was qualifications based, so we still have to move to contract negotiations.
So what are we simply approving, we're accepting your recommendation, we're not approving any contracts, okay. I move that we accept the recommendation of the Community Choice Aggregation Committee to proceed with a contract with Good Energy.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right, next, Gene Minio. To
Thank you
request.
very much.
You're well. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Nick. Although, Nick,
Thanks,
you're
everyone.
staying, so we'll thank you again later. Gene Minio is here. This should be a brief issue. We know what this is, and so I don't know that she even has to speak on it, but if Pete or Gus want to, we can. The request is to approve the funding for the holiday stroll and tree lighting on December 3rd, 2021, from 4 to 9 p.m., and approve permission to place signs from November 19th to December 3rd for the holiday stroll and tree lighting. Pete, any questions, comment, discussion?
No.
I think, Christine, you told me today the funding request is $5,600,
We're going to go with an even 6,000.
even $6,000. All right, and that's for the barriers, security, lights, the whole,
All of that part of the logistics, safety logistics, we'll
yes,
call it.
okay.
Not holiday spirits. No, we did a liquor license.
You can't expend public funds on that.
All right, so Gus.
Good thing you're here tonight, Mark.
Pete, any questions, comments, discussions?
No.
Gus?
questions. Nope.
All right, so we'll do two votes. We'll vote to appropriate the $6,000 for the holiday stroll and tree lighting, and then the signs.
So I move that we approve funding in the amount of $6,000 for the holiday stroll and tree lighting on December 3rd, 2021, from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And that's to come from the Board of Selectmen Economic Development
That is from the economic.
Improvement Enhancement Energization Fund. There we go.
The only way we get the warrant committee to replenish it for us.
Second motion.
I move that we approve the placement of signs for the holiday stroll and tree lighting from November 19th to December 3rd for the holiday stroll and tree lighting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right. Now we'll go back to the Affordable Housing Trust to discuss the request for proposals regarding the use of bond funds for rental projects, and request us to vote to approve releasing the request for proposals. I don't know that we're going to vote to approve it because it's pretty late and we have to have a discussion about it. So we can introduce this. I had kind of planned to introduce this myself, but Sarah or Jim, I don't know if, or Greg or anybody else would like to start that. Well, I don't think Jim is still here and Greg is still here, so might as well promote Greg and Jim and Sarah. I don't see anybody else from the Affordable Housing Trust here now. But Jim?
If you want to introduce it.
Okay, yeah, and Greg or Greg or Sarah, do you mind if I just give a little intro to this, or would you rather do it?
Go ahead, Mike.
All right, thank you all. So, and we've had a couple of meetings on this, and Greg and Jim, as always, have been hugely helpful, along with the other members of the trust board. So the origin of this was a couple of fold. And one is, as we were looking through the housing production plan and the action plan from last time around, and moving towards what would be the next certification date, which is in May 2022, it looked like the potential candidates for getting to what was the number for extending that safe harbor certification were not going to be done by May of 2022. And so the two...
Not going to be what?
Done by May of 2022. We're not going to be in a position to have a comprehensive permit issued on them by May of 2022. So we anticipate getting 6 units from the Hinckley South And then if the certification number is 22, which it might be, it could be 23, but we're not sure exactly what that is yet. It's going to be 22 or 23. We would have to have an additional 16 or 17 units. And so the two candidates that were in the pipeline as we're looking at this, let's say trying to do the COVID time adjustment, probably last spring, were whatever would happen at the hospital and then the possibility of the renewed Tilden Village proposal, the former Rose Bay proposal. And so we had several discussions with the Medfield Housing Authority. I think from the trust perspective, we thought the Housing Authority option might be the best candidate if they were able to get that, resolve some of their issues and bring it back. It's clear as the year has gone on that's not likely to be in a position to get us to that next certification date. That's going to have to be off to the side, and the hospital the same. Even if on the fastest track, there won't be a comprehensive permit by May. And so we were looking at, and you can blame me for this because this was originally something I had raised to discuss, is kind of looking at the successful projects we've had. I think probably the two most successful, least controversial, make everybody happy projects we've had are the 67 and 71 North Street renovations, right? It sort of hit all the check boxes. It preserved historic structures. It created some additional housing in the downtown, some of which were accessible to and potentially attractive to seniors. I know several people who have moved in there are, if not quite retired, sort of in the retirement zone. They've sort of sold their house and they've moved there, moved into one of those apartments because they like living here, but didn't want the house anymore, and have generally been successful. And so I think there's been a lot of expressions of interest in additional housing downtown for seniors, for others. And so I kind of had the idea that we've been looking. We have these bond funds that we haven't used and we may never use, and we've been trying to use them on the development of a group home, but we've had some challenges in identifying sort of a management partner for the group home. And so that's sort of we've been in the same discussion phase with that as we've been for a long time. And it's a frustration of mine, and something we have, I think we've had a lot of success with the Affordable Housing Trust. That is one area where we have not succeeded.
Mike, when you lowered your voice about your frustration with it.
The frustration we haven't been able to move ahead with the group home, right? I think
because of why?
Because we don't have a management part. The thing that we need for the trust to be able to participate in a group home is a company or a group that would manage the group home. So the trust can help with the acquisition of land, we can help with the acquisition of the building. All of the advice we've gotten, and we've spoken to a lot of people who do this, is that you can't just do it on spec, right? We can't just go out and say, this looks like a good spot for a group home, we're gonna buy this piece and then advertise it for group homes, because there's a lot of different group home providers. They have different requirements, they have different rules, they have different things they're looking for. And so what we've been trying to find is kind of somebody who would step forward and say, if you got that piece of property, we would bid on it. And then you could go get the piece of property, you'd have a competitive bidding process, and you'd have at least one person who is interested in managing it. We have not been able to get to that point. We have sort of gotten, we had one right at the beginning, and they got an offer from Westwood, sort of the proverbial offer you couldn't refuse. Westwood just handed them an acre of land in the center of town, and we couldn't compete with that. We didn't have a flat acre of land in the center of town to hand them, and that was kind of it for that. So since then, we've had a lot of these discussions. It's been a little bit of a chicken and egg dilemma in that they want to know what we have available. It's obviously been a very hot and competitive housing market for a long period of time, so a lot of the residential type houses you'd be buying, you just can't, through a public procurement process, be engaged in the residential real estate market here. So we've kind of been stuck. We're not giving up. We still would like to find the right partner for us that can help us identify the right property and move ahead. And I think some of the funds are still available. Even if we went ahead with something like this, are still available. So that's sort of what we'd hoped to do. We haven't done it. Put that to a side. But then we have these two successful projects, 67, 71. I think Pete has mentioned, a lot of people have mentioned that it'd be nice to have some more housing downtown. There are still a number of older buildings downtown that, with some refurbishment and refreshment, could undergo the same kind of renovation that that 67 and 71 North Street did, whether it's something above an existing business or some other kind of building, but it hasn't happened just through essentially word of mouth or people coming to us and saying this is something we'd like to do. So the thought here was, is there something we could do financially to stimulate that? And so the idea was, if you sort of put it out there offering to participate financially in one of these redevelopments, maybe not necessarily a developer, but a property owner might say, well, I don't really want to, I can't take this on myself, but if you added, $250,000 to the mix, I'd be interested in doing it, because that would cover some part of it. And so, because this is a little sui generis, it's gone through a lot of revisions, and I really appreciate Greg's input and Jim and Sarah's and bond counsel and everybody else to make sure it's at least legal. But that's sort of the concept. The idea being, can we stimulate, one or two additional small, most likely in the center of towns, built kind of on that 71 North Street, that would have a twofold effect. One is potentially, because those are simpler, you reasonably could get to a comprehensive permit in a certification range. Maybe it wasn't directly in May, but it's close enough. And then secondly, to kind of the secondary goal of having a little more housing in the downtown area, that while it wouldn't have to be senior restricted, it could be senior restricted, there's no reason it couldn't be, but would be attractive, because I think that's an area where a lot of seniors would like to live. We don't at the moment have a piece of land that would be perfect for something more substantial, so this would be a modest kind of bridge for that one extra year of certification, providing some additional vitality to the downtown, and then within that year afterwards, then you'd have either or both of the housing authority or the hospital or something that would come through that would kind of get us over the 10%. So that's sort of the overall rationale. There's a lot of detail and verbiage in here that's been worked on very carefully by Greg and bond counsel, and to kind of get it within the framework of what's approved. But that's the basic philosophy behind it, and the goal and the objective and all that. So I'll stop there. Jim or Greg, Sarah, did I miss anything?
I think you covered it pretty well.
Okay, thanks. Pete?
So I think it's a good idea. Back after the 200-unit 40B was proposed in town, I was talking to Riverside because of my past history with them, and they were actually looking to site a group home for brain-injured individuals. They had the money from the state. They were willing to site it in Medfield because we were in the area in which the state wanted it, the general locale. And the problem was they couldn't find a property in Medfield that suited their purposes, that made it work financially. And there was actually a house, it's the first house as you come into Medfield from Dover westward on the left, which was a ranch house that sold at the time for $500,000, and that was about $100,000 more than Riverside could have used for purchase acquisition costs, so that if they had put a four-person group home there and then gotten a couple $100,000 from this program, they would have located there.
Right. So, and there would still be money left over for that, but that's what we're looking to do in the group home context, right? Is to provide, to fill the gap between what the group home provider can pay and what the cost is, just given the cost of housing here. That's
so. I mean, the group home providers, most of them are vendors to the state, and so the question is whether or not the state has a group of people that they're looking to provide housing for. So I don't know how you can go out to the people that do it, like the May Institute or the Riverside, and try to find out if they have consumers that they need to locate somewhere.
Yeah, we've had a number of those.
You've tried that, huh?
So, okay. We're still trying, right? So we're still open for business on it. It's just we kind of run into the situation of tough place to find the right kind of building. You find some place 5 miles away. From the state perspective, their perspective, well, it's just as good if we're in Norfolk or Millis or this way. If you had, and that's what happened with. I'm going to blank on the name, but the one we were originally working with. Again, they got free land from Westwood, and that was like, well,
Yeah.
Next. So we've enjoyed meeting with you, and thank you for your time.
There was, at that time, I was also talking to some builder who had a lot over here in the downtown, and I told him, you know, make it into a group home, we'll help you, but he decided to build a colonial.
Well, don't blame him, I guess, but anything else on that?
No, that's it.
So I had one question again. First off, what you're trying to do here, I agree with Pete, that's especially in renovating buildings downtown, both from the standpoint of convenience for people who want to be downtown and from the standpoint of renovating buildings that would benefit from that. That's great. So the concept makes sense to me. It refers to this as the pilot round of IRP, but it's for $800,000, and we only have $1 million in that bond, so I wasn't sure how to understand pilot round using 800,000, and it sounds like we still have money beyond that. So is it that the Affordable Housing Trust has money that's beyond the $1 million bond, or?
Sarah or Jim, do you want to speak to the pilot round? Other than it being first, maybe last?
This is Sarah. I can speak to that. To be honest with you, this was a very hard RFP to draft because it is not a typical circumstance. So I think I found some language that I used as a template, and this was from the city of Boston, and they were indeed creating multiple rounds. So that's
So maybe, unless we're targeting aircraft pilots, we probably should change the name on that, I would think. I mean, I just don't think, I was assuming we aren't really talking about going back to the town for another $1 million of bondable funds.
No, I think the other aspect of this is that a proposal could come in that's less than the 800,000, right? So that would leave room for another round if you so choose. So we may have a smaller project that just.
Yeah. So that actually leads to my next, I was trying to understand that this is going out, it sounds like there would be lots of potential responders in, you know, Mike, to your example there, well, maybe there's a homeowner who, you know, with 250,000 would build something. So actually, I wasn't sure if this was 800, you know, whether we're talking about $800,000 with the expectation of finding somebody who's going to build a 8 or 16 unit thing, or, you know, what the increments are likely to be out of that million.
So I think the hope was that the competition would be to bid for the most units at the lowest price. So sort of in an ideal situation where you had 10 bidders,
right?
You'd be somebody saying, well, I'll do 25,000 units, someone else will say 15,000 units, someone else will say 10, right? And you have kind of that kind of a competitive process. You could have, you know, I've always kind of envisioned it, and I don't speak for the trust board and this, as sort of an 8 and an 8, but there's no reason it couldn't be a 4 and a 12. I mean, it's usually going to be in 4 unit increments because of the 40B math, but you know, it could be a 4 and a 4 and an 8. And, you know, you could have a couple of different ways of doing it, and that's why we kind of drafted it so you could have somebody to come in and say, well, I'm not doing 16, but if you gave me 100,000, I'd do 4.
Yeah.
Right, and I would do that, and then that would have the same effect, right? Because you could have it be a building owner who's going to bid and probably partner with the developer to say, look, I'll go in with you on the building, we'll take the money, this person will do the development, and kind of do it that way, right?
So bottom line is, I think I understand why this makes sense, and I can see how it could be good in many ways. There's one place my mind, this is going to be like when you talk about the Pulte proposal here. There's one place my mind wandered, and this is going back to where we started. Should the new school be put in at Wheelock? And with all the discussions about the reuse of Dale, my own personal view is that some portion of that school would be an ideal candidate for conversion to senior housing, except that we probably are going to have to be smart about where we would find the source of funds to, you know, at least contribute to that kind of project. So the only reaction I had, it's not a strong enough reaction to pull the rug out from this, but I'm saying, would we be better off taking $1 million if these other things happen, and we'll know relatively soon. If those things happen, would we be better off? Of course, we wouldn't be able to get that project going
for years.
For the time, never mind.
Well, here's my,
I see where I'm going
yeah, I
with
see where you're going. So here's my, again, response to that, is that my hope would be, if we are doing senior housing there, that we are in our sort of permanent safe harbor.
Yeah.
And so
okay.
we don't have to necessarily
Okay.
march to the state, well, how the state defines affordable housing,
Yeah,
right? Because
okay.
we are in the mode of,
Right.
right now, we have sort of wedded our view of affordable housing to how the state defines it, right? And I think we all have problems with it for a variety of reasons. It's not been a particularly successful approach, as we've discussed, but it is what it is. Once we're there, the way the trust bylaws are written, we actually don't have to be tied to the state's definition of capital A, capital H affordable housing. I mean, to reuse the Dale site, it would probably have to be owned by the trust, but it doesn't, the trust can own and operate affordable community housing that doesn't meet the state standard. And so my hope would be we wouldn't have to put any money into it, right? Because it would be attractive enough
Right.
to a private developer who would want to lease that from the town that we wouldn't have to put any money. That would be my
Okay,
hope.
all right.
So, if that, yeah, I mean, but.
Those are my questions.
Okay, so, I think we need to come up with a better name, and so one of the reasons we're not gonna issue it tonight is that, and we can put it on for our next meeting to issue it, this RFP, if you guys are both good with it, is we do need to come up with a better name than the incentivizing rentals program. That is what it is. I kind of named it that just as a purely descriptive name. What is this? I call it blue shirt. This is a blue shirt. This program incentivizes, well, we'll call it the incentivizing rentals program. So, but we can
Because
put.
the time I spent in the military, the acronym ERP is immediate response to this. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, so we'll come up with a better name, hopefully. So if anyone have any suggestions for a better name, a long acronym, that would be great, but appreciate the comments. All right, next, review and vote to approve the Town of Medfield financial policy. And begin with my thanks to the warrant committee and Christine and Nick and everybody else who has had, and thank you to Jim and Greg and Sarah as well, sorry about that, who has contributed to this revision of the policy. It's substantively the same, but I think it's improved from the input we've gotten. So, as I mentioned, if any of the folks in the public have a comment, let me know on this one. But Pete, any comments, questions, discussion?
Was this in the meeting
This was in the
materials?
packet, yeah.
Oh, it was, I didn't see it, I'm sorry.
Right after the community choice aggregation.
Okay, I was working off of Gus's draft, so I didn't see what the warrant committee suggested then.
Yeah, I think the major warrant committee suggestion, because in the last draft we reviewed, the test for compliance was essentially we adopted the test that the warrant committee has developed over the last several years, and then the warrant committee added what's in Roman 3 on financial forecasting and trend monitoring. And as you can see at the end, the warrant committee has also expressed an interest in signing off on and agreeing to the policy as well. So any comments, Pete? Or do you want to, guess what, do you have comments? Pete, you want to look at it? Didn't have a chance to.
Mine are super micro. On page 3, section 2, capital building maintenance plan.
Yeah.
Second paragraph, there's 2 references to the school committee there. And I think, Nick, you had previously crossed that out in both places, but it didn't get crossed out. So my question is, in that second paragraph, that's like the only place the school committee exists in this policy? Is that intentional? Because it was crossed out in a prior version.
I don't recall. The reference was there because they have their buildings under that 20-year plan.
So it should stay in.
I think for that one they should, yeah.
Okay, so it was just one of the earlier versions, but it was your
I know. I
your
remember it was
markup.
crossed out. I don't
Yeah,
know
okay.
how it came back.
And then the other question I had was under section 6 proceed. This is actually a question I had before, so I still had the question. proceeds from the sale of town assets. I had asked a question and a comment before. To the extent permitted by law, the proceeds of any sales of town land or other assets, and the scenario that I raised was departments selling used vehicles. And we had a discussion that said, well, that's usually a used vehicle that's used to offset the cost of a vehicle. That's, because we had the conversation, it's clear to me that's what we meant. When I read it, it's not obvious to me that that's what we meant.
You mean this sentence saying
First
upon
sentence.
approval?
No, first sentence. To the extent permitted by law, the proceeds of any sales of town land or other assets.
Yeah.
So when the DPW sells one of their old trucks, does this section apply to that sale? And I think the answer is no, because they usually take that trade in.
Well, that's what the second sentence addresses, right? Upon the Board of Selectmen approval, proceeds of the sale of other town assets excluding it may be used by the department that generates proceeds to offset
Okay, you answered my
previously
question.
approved
There we
capital
go.
expenditures
Okay,
or
yeah,
to
there we
fund
go.
other one-time
Okay,
expenditures.
and then the other question I had in that same paragraph,
Yeah.
in that same first sentence, shall be deposited in a reserve, stabilization, trust, or other undesignated fund. Does that mean, I just don't know what that means. Does an undesignated fund mean like a reserve fund is not designated for a specific purpose? So that's what we mean by undesignated. It's just I didn't know the use of the word. Okay. Those are the only questions.
Whereas a trust might be a designated fund.
Right.
Yeah, okay. That, I just didn't understand the usage. That's it.
Okay. All right.
Is there a timing issue to approve this, or could we do it the next meeting and give me time to read it?
We could do it at the next meeting, if you want to read it, and then, yeah, we can do it November 2nd. I think the warrant committee might have voted for it. Are they going to put it on their,
They're not sure where it's going to fit on their agenda
Okay,
yet,
all right.
so.
so we can put this on, a vote on this for the 2nd, so you have time to look at it.
Okay,
Get your green-eyed shade out and read it.
thank you.
If it helps, Pete, if you were using my markup, I did a near total audit for my markup to this one. So in terms of anything that you saw in the comments, they probably all get incorporated in, or there was something that reworded, which was at least I liked better. So you could probably just read it, and if nothing snags up, you can be relatively confident that the blocking and tackling review get taken care of
Okay.
by me.
Good.
Unless you want to jump into it, but.
All right, action items. First, vote to approve the application for 40B technical assistance to the Zoning Board of Appeals during the hearing and decision process for the Hinckley South project. Any comments or questions on this one?
No.
Do you need to recuse yourself from this, Pete, or no?
I can, I suppose,
Or just,
sure.
I'm just up to you. I don't know if you have to or what the.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of it, but sure, I'll recuse myself. Yep.
I just want to make sure. All right, you have a
Right.
motion, Gus?
I move that we approve the application for 40B technical assistance to the Zoning Board of Appeals during the hearing and decision process for the Hinckley South project.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Pete. Refuses. A vote to authorize me to sign the budget revision request number 4 for the Dale Street School project. And will the town administrator describe the requested change?
$1,000, it's in the
$1,000.
packet, yep. Budget revision amount is $1,162.63.
And what is it for?
Let's see,
Move to other costs.
now I don't remember.
I knew this when I looked at it.
There it is.
We were transferring unused from the OPM feasibility fees to cover costs for the net zero energy study.
There you go. Okay. Any questions on this?
Nope.
Motion?
Okay, I move that we authorize the chair to sign the budget revision request number 4 for the Dale Street School project.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right, next request to vote for us to accept the bids for 2021-2022 rock salt, solar salt, and treated salt. Sure harbinger of winter coming, awarding the salt bids.
Like solar salt. It just sounds like something you should put on your food.
I'm interested that Morton Salt Company puts in the bid.
That one's good too.
Any questions, comments, discussions?
Nope.
We have a motion.
I move that we accept the bids for 2021-2022 CC rock salt, solar salt, and treated salt.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Opposed? None.
Are you awarding the bid to somebody?
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. It didn't say that there.
says vote to accept the bids.
Yeah,
Feedback.
Except, is it all of them?
it is, you're doing, CC Rock Salt is the primary bidder, secondary bidder, so you're doing it, you should probably break them down into 3 different votes, I would think.
Yeah, okay. So I'll try that again. I move that we accept the bids for 2021-2022 for CC Rock Salt with the primary bidder of Eastern Minerals Incorporated and the secondary bidder of Morton Salt Company. For solar salt, primary bidder Eastern Minerals Incorporated. Treated salt, primary bidder Eastern Minerals Incorporated, secondary bidder Morton Salt Company.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep.
Opposed? All right. Next, vote to authorize town accountant Joy Rashudo and town administrator Christine Truweiler to serve as creator and certifier respectfully for
very
the
fancy.
portal of the Norfolk County Disbursement of American Rescue Plan Act funds. Creator and certifier.
I am putting that on my resume.
The Right Honorable Certifier for the Norfolk County portal.
I believe that also means I'm in trouble if we
Perambulating the
misspent it.
boundaries of the
Right.
town.
Now, I wonder, well, I won't even mention.
Yes.
All right. Any questions, comments, discussion?
Nope.
Motion.
I move that we authorize town accountant Joy Rashudo and town administrator Christine Truweiler to serve as creator and certifier, respectively, for the portal for the Norfolk County Disbursement of American Rescue Plan Act federal funds.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have a request to appoint Thomas Connors, John Day, and John Thompson to the Medfield Historical Commission as associate members for terms expiring on June 30th, 2022. I did not realize that Judge Connors was a Medfield resident. I'm glad to see he's going to be providing services to us, to the town in his retirement from the bench. So, any questions, comments, concerns about any of these folks?
Ready? I move that we appoint Thomas Connors, John Day, and John Thompson to the Medfield Historical Commission as associate members for terms to expire June 30th, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Next, a vote to increase the size of the Medfield Energy Committee and appoint George Whiting, James Redden, and Andrew Gerald to the Medfield Energy Committee for terms expiring on June 30th, 2022. I think by the time we're done, like half the town will be a member of the Medfield Energy Committee. It's like the House of Representatives meets as the committee of the whole, to consider.
So what's the total, you should have the total membership in that motion.
Yeah. I'm not sure there was enough room on the agenda to list the
Those are
total
just additional members.
additional members.
Yeah, but it says move to increase the size, so what's the size gonna be?
I will tell you once.
15, 18?
Well, as Nick is looking up, I have some comments. When the Energy Committee wanted to increase its size last time, I raised issues about the size of the Energy Committee. I think it went up to at least 12 or 13, so I think we're going to be closing in on 15 or 16, which to me is an ungainly committee. The answer, the explanation last time was that, well, the Energy Committee is actually moving in several different directions, and therefore this committee is being broken down into subcommittees. And clearly they are, with things like the community choice aggregation. You can see how that's separate from the work that some people have done, like Jim Nail with the Development Committee. I have a personal concern because I am not happy, and I don't want to regenerate the discussion we started our meeting with, but I am absolutely not happy that the Energy Committee did not pursue the net zero at the new school with Eversource. We basically saw an example of a selectman from Lexington who said it can be done. Based on that, I changed my position about having net zero be a goal for that school. We approved having Energy Committee representatives working with the building committee. We approved an Eversource representative to work with the committee, and as far as I'm concerned, I didn't find out till 3 weeks ago that basically nothing had been done to get a similar agreement on net zero. So my concern is that the Energy Committee is not delivering on the things that it's trying to do, so it concerns me that maybe they're trying to do too many things. Having said that, I've read the resumes of the three people who are proposed here, and there's absolutely nothing in my comments that's intended to question or disparage these three people who I think at least two of the three were already volunteering with the committee. So where I'm coming from on this is got to do with the activities of the Energy Committee itself. I was thinking I was going to go in to say I think we should defer this. I will defer my position on that to a discussion whether you all think it's a great idea to expand the Energy Committee by 3 more members. I think these are worthy members if we decide to do that. But then I would like a request to have the chair of the Energy Committee come into one of our meetings for an explanation of what the heck happened for net zero.
So I am fully in agreement, Gus, that we should separate the two.
Yep.
I agree with you that the individuals here are well qualified to do this, and I think we should separate those two. And I think we should have as a set agenda item an opportunity for the Energy Committee and whichever. Now, again, we may have to move to like the high school auditorium so the Energy Committee can come, but we can have the Energy Committee come and we can have like an airing of grievances with the Energy Committee. And I say that in a lighthearted way,
yeah.
But it's, in other words, we're going to come in and we're going to talk it out, right, in that forum.
So then the question on the table here is, Pete, you're on the Energy Committee, so I'll make a presumption that you agree with the expansion of yet 3 more people. I am skeptical of that, but I'm not adamant that we not do it. So, Mike, I guess you have, I'll listen to you.
Yeah, I think we ought to add these folks. They're interested in doing it. They're qualified. I think that the question of what the Energy Committee is and should be doing is a separate question.
Okay.
That's apart from these 3 folks being on there. So I would favor adding these 3.
Okay.
So you're going from 12 to 15.
Well qualified, expanding from 12 to 15, and then setting up as an agenda item at one of our November meetings to have this discussion that you want to have.
Okay.
We can post that as the agenda item. The Energy Committee can prepare and come in, and
All right.
we can have that discussion. So that's what I would prefer to do. And Fred, I see that you've raised your hand and that you're putting a question in the Q&A, but we'll defer that to November as well. So do we have a motion for this?
Sure. I move that we increase the size of the Energy Committee from 12 to 15 members and appoint George Whiting, James Redden, and Andrew Jarrell as the new members of the Medfield Energy Committee for terms to expire June 30th, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, consent agenda. We have 5 items. The Medfield Lions request one-day beer and wine licenses for the Lions Senior Holiday Luncheon on Sunday, December 12th, 2021 at the Center, and their dinner meeting on Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021 at the Center. Vote to approve and sign resolution recognizing the Medfield Food Cupboard's 30th anniversary. And vote to accept the resignation of Liz Sandeman from the Medfield Outreach Advisory Board. Boy Scout Troop 89 requests permission to place a sign at the Medfield Transfer Station announcing Christmas tree pickup and recycling program. And the Church of the Advent requests permission to post signs from October 30th to November 3rd, 2021 for its annual holiday bazaar scheduled for Saturday, November 13th, 2021. Any comments on the consent agenda?
I have one comment. I spoke with Boy Scout Troop 89 representative today, and they would like to go from just the transfer station to all the approved locations, if it's okay with you.
Okay. Any issue with that? I have no issue with that. No. Any questions on any of the consent items at all?
No.
All right, with the amendment to the consent item, that the Boy Scout troops would like their signs at all the approved locations, do we have a motion to approve the consent?
I move that we approve the consent agenda items to include the revision of the Boy Scout Troop 89 requests for sign locations.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep.
All right. We don't have any meeting minutes. Town administrator updates.
You will have meeting minutes very shortly because our recording clerk started this evening.
Excellent.
So you should have
Is
minutes.
it Bill?
It has to be. I'm the only one who can read my own notes.
He was asked. And I have nothing else to
All
say.
right. Next meeting dates, November 2nd, 2021, November 7th, 2021, special town meeting, November 16th, 2021. Selectmen reports. Pete.
I held office hours. It's the first Friday of every month. I hold office hours at the Center, 9 to 10. The Medfield Foundation Legacy Fund met and is in the middle of the second round of soliciting grants or grant applications for the Legacy Fund grants. And then the Energy Committee met, and as I'm on the Town of Medfield Community Action Plan subgroup, working group that's working on the plan for the town. That's it.
And I don't have much. I was in a work tunnel last week, and this week I'm working to get through the warrant committee video meetings to try to come up to speed on some of the cost issues with the schools. Once again, I would like to recognize the warrant committee for what they're doing to dig in and digest and organize and communicate what's a very complex issue.
I don't think I have anything that comes to mind. I don't think we had, do we have another collective bargaining? Have we confirmed another date?
Not yet.
We're still working to confirm another date.
It's a work in progress.
All right. Finally, we need a motion to close the warrant for the special town meeting.
I move that we close the warrant
Second.
for the special town meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
What's the Red Sox score?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Meeting adjourned, and thank you all. Have a good night.